Hey family, welcome back to my video. Today we will see what if Naruto took Hanabi and Hinata in washroom. Before we start, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the original author of this story. Your generosity is greatly appreciated. Now enjoy the video. The sun rose slowly over the mountains and shining down on Konoha, or what was left of the once great city anyway. It had been a few days since the war that had happened and the arrival of the metal creature. The shinobi from enemy nations had already gone home, taking their dead with them. The village itself was in horrible conditions, one of which could easily be seen, considering that most of the large wall that once guarded Konoha was now gone, only a few chunks of it left. Few people could even be spared to guard it for that matter. Most of the village's buildings had been destroyed or were in ruins, 3/4 of them at least. The streets were still cracked, scorched, soaked from the jutsu that had been recklessly shot inside the city. Large piles of buildings and sand were scattered about the village, blocking most of the roads for civilians to use. People, most not having a home anymore, slept outside in the stars, on wet pieces of the ground in the village that was spared from the intense fighting. You could tell where people gathered by the fires throughout the village, most of them just gathering to one big fire and resting there. The shinobi, on the other hand, had quite a bit to do. They were busy trying to restore as much of the city as possible or at least make it more livable for the people and wounded. They were scattered about the streets, guarding it from Anther invasion. This would be the perfect time for another nation to strike, and if it weren't for the LRKs that were traveling throughout the village, most of the shinobi would just be busy guarding instead of giving support to the people. For dog people that seriously needed to put on some pants, they weren't half bad. Well, to Sakura anyway. That should do it, Sakura stated, finishing up the wound on a small child. The child smiled at her, looking down at her leg, which was now good as new. Even if it's healed, you should try to stay off of it for a day or two, alright? Sakura asked the child, who nodded and got off the crate she was sitting on, running towards her mother. Sakura sighed at the thought that the child might break her leg again. She was happy that the little girl was the last one that she needed to treat for right now, and then walking over and taking her place. Sakura went over to one of the fires, sitting down and just enjoying how warm it was. It had been 8 hours since her last break, having to work through the night to get through the amount of people that were wounded and save as many as possible. They still lost 30 people, which added to the count of over 3/4 of the Konoha population being wiped out. She wondered what would have happened if the metal creatures had been around for even a minute longer. If it wasn't for Gaara and Irvine, they probably would be dead by now. Of course, there was one more person that helped destroy them, but You seem tired, Sakura heard someone state, looking over to see Tamari of the Sands smiling down at her. Sakura smiled lightly, watching Tamari sit down next to her. Yeah, I've had a long night, she stated, looking over at the fire. I still can't believe that we've lost so many people. It could have been worse. The war could still be going on and the metal creatures returning once more. Tamari replied, crossing her legs as she bent back a bit, her arms supporting her. If T weren't for Gaara and Irvine-kun, most of us would be dead by now. Thanks for taking care of them, by the way. Sakura sighed at the mentioning of them. You do know what's going to happen now, right? Sakura asked, Tamari nodding her head slightly. Those two are going to become political tools, more than what shinobi usually are. Irvine, especially since he wasn't born in the Leafs village, Tamari stated, looking into the fire. Since they pretty much were the ones to destroy the metal creatures with their gifts. Sakura shook her head, looking back over at Tamari. Only time will tell. Hinata walked through the village, passing by various groups of people and homeless. Leaping over a large chunk of building, she continued on her way through the streets. It had been a few days since the war between the nations ended, and with that she had so much work she needed to do. All medic nins were busy taking care of everyone and getting as many of the shinobi back to working condition as possible. She had little time to even think about Naruto until now. He hadn't woken once since collapsing on the spot where Anko had been. Hinata finally had a chance to go see him after finishing up the large group of people that had lined up to be taken care of. There were so many people injured during the fight, and they were lacking the supplies needed to take care of them all. A lot of them were also in critical condition too, so this made everything twice as hard. She, thanks to Shizune who took over for her, was able to get a small break to go see how Naruto was doing. Hinata passed by another group of people, waving at them as she went along. They waved back, but not with as much enthusiasm as her. There had been a lot of emotional physical stress for people in the village, so it was understandable. Going around a large pile of sand, Hinata continued on her way towards the Hokage tower. It was one of the few buildings left intact and where the critical patients were being held at the moment. After a few more minutes, she finally arrived at the tower, passing by the front door security and making her way through the clusters of people. The place was being used as more than just a place to hold the wounded. The new Hokage was doing her best to get as much power restored and supplies ready to sue as possible. Even with the loss of her husband, she was focusing on taking care of everyone else. You really had to admire her for that. Walking up the long, very long stairs towards the top, Hinata arrived on the floor she needed to be on. Turning and walking down the hall, she headed towards Naruto's room. Of course, she wasn't expecting Kakashi, Asuma, and Tsunade to be standing next to the door. Walking up to them, she wondered what was going on. "What's wrong?" Hinata asked, everyone looking towards her. Tsunade sighing in relief at the sight of her. "Good, now you can go in instead of us." Hinata was confused at what Tsunade had said, looking at her with a raised eyebrow. "I mean, would you mind seeing if anything is wrong with Naruto? Why can't you go in yourselves?" Hinata asked, the three of them looking at each other before turning back towards her. "Well, you see, the thing is..." "Wait, Hinata." Hinata walked past them, opening the door and heading inside, closing it behind her before Kakashi could finish his sentence. Walking into the room, she looked at the bed that had Naruto in it, also taking notice of the women sitting next to him, along with on the other side Iruka and Sakura. Iruka looked scared stiff, his entire body sweating as he kept his eyes on Naruto. Then again, he was in the presence of the person that could easily destroy the village in a single swing of her tail. So yeah, she could understand that he was the only one with enough balls to come into the room to see Naruto, unlike the others. Sighing, Hinata walked towards Iruka, sitting down next to him and looking down at Naruto, though in a more relaxed manner considering that she didn't fear the Kyuubi. That's right, she didn't fear the demon that could easily turn Konoha into a smoldering crater of ruins and destruction. Why, you ask? Well, for the simple fact that she was more angered at the Kyuubi than anything else. "You're the third person to come see him in 3 days," the Kyuubi stated, looking over at Iruka. "If you count him and the summoning." Sakura snorted, Iruka just shaking a bit more than he was earlier. Hinata looked up from Naruto and towards the Kyuubi. "Really, shows how much he's cared for." Hinata looked back down at Naruto, seeing how bad in a shape he was in. You'd think with his ability to recover quickly that he would be back to normal by now. What would cause him to stay like this for so long? The Kyuubi coughed, looking down at Naruto with a small smile. "You're probably wondering why he's taking so long." Hinata looked up at the Kyuubi, seeing her turn her attention away from Naruto. "He's been like this ever since he was young, not allowing me to heal him rapidly. Give him some time, he'll come to eventually." The Kyuubi stated, smiling even more. Iruka and Hinata looked at her in shock, Sakura just shrugging at what the Kyuubi stated. "He's been in worse situations before," she stated, looking down at Naruto with a frown. "He honestly doesn't know when to give up." Her face changed into a small smile, looking back up at the Kyuubi. "You know, I really have to." "What the hell are you doing?" she yelled, watching the Kyuubi reach over and softly stroke Iruka's cheek. "You seem interesting, mating season's just around the corner. How about you?" And Kyuubi's face changed from a smile to that of annoyance when she felt someone grab her arm. Looking over, she saw that Sakura had been the one to pull her away. "Sorry, he's taken," she stated, glaring at the Kyuubi with a furious intensity. The Kyuubi narrowed her eyes at Sakura. "Last time I checked or smelled, he was still a virgin." Iruka's eyes bulged out at Kyuubi's remark, falling back in his chair as he was still surprised at how. Iruka looked back over his chair, seeing the Kyuubi sit back into her chair. "You can actually smell that?" The Kyuubi nodded, grinning at Iruka and Tsukoi, who was still pissed, mind you. She thought for a moment, looking back over at Sakura with a smile. "You know we could always." "Will you shut the fuck up?" Everyone turned towards Hinata, who was gritting her teeth as she tried to keep from killing everyone in the room. Hinata looked over at the Kyuubi, who seemed to be a little taken back at her outburst. "If you want to be whore, that's your own business, but take it somewhere else. You're not going to be doing talking thinking about that sort of shit in this room. If you want to continue, take it somewhere else." Everyone just looked at Hinata with their jaws to the floor, well, most of them. The Kyuubi was too busy laughing her ass off. "I like you, you're going to be a great mate for Naruto-kun." Hinata just stared at the woman with a blank expression, her face bright red at the thoughts she was having at the moment. Her head filled with those thoughts faster than anyone could imagine. Not even the author, who was almost scared at how fast her imagination worked. Hinata would have stayed in her dream state longer, but apparently she had scared the author a little too much. "Hinata-chan." Hinata looked in the direction of the door, seeing Sakura burst through it a second later. "The scouting teams have reported a large group of nins heading towards the village. The Hokage wants us at the west gates now, Sakura taking a moment to rest while Hinata snapped out of her dream state, taking in everything. Nodding her head, Hinata looked over at Naruto one more time before heading out the door and towards the gate, Sakura tailing behind her. Must be them. The Kyuubi looked over at Naruto, said person sitting up on the bed and stretching. God, that was a good nap. Should you really be getting out of doing work by sleeping all the time? Iruka asked, Naruto waving off his question. I'm sure they can take care of everything by themselves, Naruto stated, looking over at the Kyuubi. More importantly, did Hinata-chan pass your test? Yes, she did with flying colors, most of it being blue-purple, the Kyuubi replied with a smile, while Naruto moved his legs over to the side of the bed. Standing up, he stretched once more and looked around for something. Hey, Miss Kyuubi, have you seen my belts? I haven't been able to find them in this room no matter how hard I've tried. Iruka coughed, getting everyone's attention as he reached into one of his pockets and pulled out something. I have them here, Naruto, he said, handing Naruto the scroll. Naruto grinned, taking the scroll and unraveling it. In a puff of smoke, Naruto's equipment appeared in a large pile. Naruto went through the pile, picking out his clothing and setting them aside. Having all of them, he began to drop the pants that the hospital provided. Wait, stop Naruto, what are you doing? Iruka asked, Naruto just looking at him in a dull manner. Changing, what do you think? Seeing Iruka's expression, Naruto sighed. They've both already seen it, and you're a guy, so you shouldn't be bothered by it. Wait, they're seen it. Yeah, Miss Kyuubi was sealed inside me. Thus can see everything I've seen. Naruto stated, the Kyuubi letting out a light, innocent whistle at the remark. And Sakura once had to give me a bath because I had been paralyzed by another spider. Sakura's eyes lit up as she remembered when that happened, Naruto looking over at her with the same dull expression. I swear, all you ever think about is getting in some guy's pants. Is that a bad thing? In some countries, yes, Naruto stated, putting on his usual pair of pants and pulling off his shirt. Damn, was all Iruka could think when he saw Naruto's abs. He had, believe it or not, 10. Iruka never thought it possible, but he had a 10 abs. Naruto took note that Sakura's eyes had lit up even more, the Kyuubi just waiting for Naruto to finish with a bored expression. So how are you and Iruka doing, Sakura? Naruto asked, putting his shirt on. Sakura's expression changed, switching over to a warm smile. We're doing well, Iruka owes twice now. I helped him gather your things into the scroll. Naruto replied with an O and put his hoodie on. Picking up his belts, he attached they around his belt. Slipping on some boots, Naruto looked behind him to see Sakura grinning evilly at Iruka while licking her lips, said person starting to sweat up a swarm once more. Naruto then headed over towards the door. When you two are done, make sure to head towards the west gate. Why, Naruto-kun, you already said that the nin weren't going to be a problem? Iruka asked, Naruto looking over his shoulder at Iruka with a grin. I want the shinobi from the rock village to meet my family. They still have a hard time believing that I'm from Konoha, Naruto stated, laughing as he walked out into the hallway. Making his way down, he noted that the meeting was going to be very amusing for him. Might as well have some fun before the war. Author, well, that's it for now. Need to go work on the new original story for another site XD. That was a mouthful. Please read and review. So, the plot thickens, or not? Author, well, the reason why I didn't bring this out yesterday was because, well, I actually didn't feel like it, to be honest. XD. Now on to the reviews. Sitch. You do know that what you said is utter bullshit to me, right? I'm not saying that your opinion on how things should be is wrong, I'm saying that it's flawed. In the points of 1. Hinata being the weakest character in the series is kinda bullshit. She's actually stronger than some of the other shinobi. Ino, Shino, and even Kiba in combat. Why? She fucking owned a summons boss in one hit. Let's see Shino do that with his bugs. 2. Your version on how the story should go has nothing to do with the story I planned. I know that some aspects of the story have been done before, but I like to add in my own twists here and there. I'm not going to give Naruto a harem, his pairing is already set in stone, one way or another. I wish people would focus on other characters and not just Naruto. At least I try to be original, then just rely on how popular the characters are to get reviews. XD. 3. I assume that, after reading this, you are either new to the series or haven't read the manga. Considering what you said about Hinata, I have to say that you're new to the series and haven't even seen the fillers yet. Sakura and Ino are also as overdone as Hinata, and Ino's a bitch in the beginning, not after the time skip or in the filler arcs. Also, here's a good reason why Hinata would get stronger. The one that she loved died at some point and she couldn't protect him. Works every time, unless you say that never works, and therefore go against around half the animes ever made in the fighting area. I love newbies, so much fun to answer their reviews XD. Artemis Igniton. I'm glad that you enjoyed the story, and yes, it's read to leave cliffhangers. It allows B to be lazy, which is always nice. Also, too confusing of a name. I now WAI for future review reference, and because I had to look back at the review 4 times to write your name. WINDMASTER 324. Glad you enjoyed the story. Update here. Dears, true, though only one path that fits with my story plans. You'll just have to read to find out, and when you reach the cliffhanger, curse be out in various forms. THEDISTURBEDONE 666,666. Indeed? Well, it's kinda obvious on who he's going to fight. Kinda been leaving hints to it throughout the story. Of course, it's them XD. Seriously, you'll find out who they are soon enough, just not in this chapter. About explaining on how Naruto became the Hokage, well, you're going to have to wait on that as, well, Rozzy the player. Sorry, just couldn't help it. XD. Glad you're enjoying the story, hope to see more of your reviews, vid. As I recall, Midara was the Cage of Mist XD. Irvine, well, he's from another country altogether. Wink wink. Also, my friend, not just the 5-6 major villages, but all the villages. Better to have them on your side than against you. ANIDRAGON77. Tis sees, well, you'll find out eventually on those, one way or another. Conceptor, don't we both, my friend, don't we both? AI, glad you found the sequel and hope you enjoy it. Wrath of Air, I will. BATTOUSA I222. He's not here at the moment, please call again. Prison Dragon, I see meh. Also, it's a war between the people who made the huge-ass metal spiders in the last one, that much should be apparent. XD. Thanks for reviewing. Disclaimer, I do not own anything sucks, don't it? Also, sorry for the title, my family was pushing for me to get off the computer. Enjoy the fic. So, the plot thickens, or not. A lone woman could be seen walking through the broken streets of Konoha, her purplish hair coming all the way down to just below her hips. She was wearing deep blue pants, along with a pink shirt short enough to show her stomach. She wore a large brown jacket coming down to her knees, having boots, fingerless gloves, and the most noticeable thing about her being that her eyes were covered by a red cloth. People looked at her curiously, wondering what a woman like her would be doing in the village. So close the woman turned her head slowly, moving it towards what seemed to be her target. You had to give her a break though, I mean, it was a few days ago that she felt it. It's not like she got an exact location on where he was, but she knew the general location. Come to think of it, all of her searching up to this point had been meaningless, to tell the truth. She could have just waited until he used his gifts, and she wouldn't have had to go through all of the searching. Then again, it was better than returning home. The woman continued to scan the area for any traces of what she was looking for, almost giving up in and that was until she felt a light presence from him. That was enough to pinpoint and move towards the location. Turning in the direction, she ran as fast as she could towards him. She had been waiting for this for a long time, and there was no way in hell she was going to be denied it any longer. I finally found him. Anyone that could keep up with the woman's movements could see one of the creepiest smiles slowly form on her face as she headed towards her goal. Akami had someone knock on the door, turning around to see whoever had entered. Tamari opened the door, slowly closing the door behind her, and walked into the room. She was tired from all that had happened, hoping to return to Tsunade and get some rest soon. It wasn't the most beautiful places known, but it had its moment. Before she could have said peace, however, she needed to take care of something. Now lying before Tamari was unconscious Irvine, his body being torn due to the transformation he had done a few days ago. It was repairing itself though, able to make it look like he had never even gone through the transformation to begin with. Irvine, though, had not waken up once since then. Shizune said that he was going to be fine, but even then they were still worried. They, as in mostly Akami. She had been there most of the time, considering that she really didn't have anything to do besides go on hour or so long patrols. Seriously, if it wasn't already obvious to you, meaning that you're pretty slow, then you should know that they do have feelings for one another. For the love of God, if you didn't notice the corny cliché scenes written between these two, then you seriously need some help. Tamari noticed this quite a long time ago, in case you're wondering. I'm guessing he hasn't moved at all, right? Tamari asked, walking over towards the other seat. Sitting down, Akami looked over at her with a stoic expression. Yes, he hasn't moved once. You sure? For all you know, he could be faking it, Tamari stated. Akami keeping her stoic expression. You know, for when he finally wakes up and you let your emotions out, like in those crappy second-rate movies that no one watches after the first time. A little too much? Tamari asked. Akami nodding her head slightly and looking back down at Irvine. You know he's not going to get better faster with you staring at him. I know, but… yeah, that's the thing. When's the last time you slept? Akami didn't even look up from Tamari, only shifting her body slightly to the question. I don't need much sleep. Akami stated, Tamari realizing what effect her question had a moment. I see. Tamari replied, sweat dropping. She sighed, reflecting on how she needed to think about what she was going to say beforehand. It was common for this to happen to her in Suna, very common that people in Suna seemed to like to torment her with it. Yeah, and when they did, she would beat the living hell out of them with her fan. Back to the subject, this reminded her of someone she knew. It snapping to her a moment later. I just realized something, you're like my brother Gara, Tamari said, Akami glancing over at her. Well, you both have sleep issues and you both seem to be the quiet type. Also, you take control of an element. This is making no sense to you, huh? Akami just stared at her for a few more seconds before looking back down at Irvine. Tamari, sighing once more, wondered what it would take to break through to this girl. And then, they came. Tamari looked over towards the door, hearing someone knock on it and opening it up. It was Shizune. Irvine-sensei, said person seemed to be surprised when she saw Tamari. Taking a moment to breath, she took in a deep breath and looked over at Akami with a serious expression. Akami, the 6th Hokage, has called for all shinobi to report to the gates. We have incoming shinobi, and we need everyone to gather there as quickly as possible, she stated, looking over at Tamari. Also, she wanted to know if you would be willing to help out as well. Sure, why not? I owe you guys for taking care of Gara anyway, Tamari stated, glancing over at Akami, who stood up from her chair and looked down at Irvine one more time. She then looked over at Shizune with her usual expression. Understood, she stated, walking towards the door and exiting the room. Tamari and Shizune just blinked at Akami, wondering how cliché that could have gotten if they pushed it. Honestly, people just weren't original these days. The woman smiled as she watched the two women leave the room. She had been waiting for quite some time for them to leave and was actually happy that they were gone. Canceling the genjutsu she had placed on herself, she looked in through the window from the tree she was standing on more closely, scanning over her target with eagerness. He had grown from the last time she saw him, that being quite some time ago. He also seemed to still be unconscious from his transformation, which in itself is explanatory. This would make things easier for her, taking the man and activating his Savian seal. Once she did that, he would follow her regardless of what had happened to him in the past. They were made to follow orders after all. Slowly opening the window, the woman stepped into the room. She walked up to the bed, smiling down at her target. He was sleeping so soundly, it seemed almost too good to try to move him. Then again, she would be able to see that sleeping face every morning. Reaching and grabbing the covers, the woman pulled the sheets off of the man. Stalling for a moment, she reached underneath the body and lifted him up, heading towards the window and jumping out of it. Landing on the ground, she ran as fast as she could towards the city walls. She could hardly wait to activate the seals. The woman had been waiting all this time after all. Shikamaru sighed, laying on his back in some of the unscorched grass left in Konoha and watching the clouds. He had been helping to move supplies with his shadows all day and couldn't help but leave a cage bunshin to go through the torment instead of him. He was now currently about to have his 5th nap for the day, would have been 6th if Ino hadn't caught him sleeping and chased him for an hour or two. Honestly, that girl was one of the most bitchest girls he had ever met. He prayed to God that whoever tried to get close to her would be protected from and prepared for her wrath and bitching. Shikamaru wondered when they were going to either realize that he had switched out with a cage bunshin or found him sleeping in the area. That reminded him, he had been sleeping in the area for several hours now. He would need to switch areas if he wanted to get as much sleep as possible. So, reluctantly, he sat up, followed by standing up and wiping his ass back of any grass that might have gotten on it. Looking around, he wondered where to get some more sleep. He froze, seeing someone run by him, landing on the ground and jumping into the air once more. She looked like a 19-year-old, possibly 20, being around 5'10" in height. She had no headband on her, which in a way wasn't odd really. Either being a missing nin or just someone who was raised outside a village, it didn't matter. What did matter was the fact that she was carrying Irvine with her as she went. Shikamaru, acting on instinct, reached to one of his pouches and pulled out a scroll. Opening it, he focused a little chakra into the scroll and crushed it. Placing the scroll back into his pouch, Shikamaru ran after the woman, trying to close the wide gap between them as best he could. This was going to be troublesome, damn. A little earlier, Naruto sighed, walking towards the gates that the rock nin were heading towards. Actually, considering all the complaining and yelling he could hear coming from the gate, he could tell that they had already arrived. Naruto noted to himself that he would need to teach them to have more manners when entering another nation's territory. He wanted to avoid wars if it were possible. Continuing on his way towards the gates, he could see a few people had broken from the main group. One was a man around 6'7", having only a pair of pants on to tell the truth. His huge gut stuck out, the upper part of his body having so many damn muscles that Naruto didn't even try to imagine his power, though he had seen it before. The man had short dark hair, a pair of glasses between his eyes. His family was famous for poor eyesight, also for how muscular they were. His hands and feet were shaped like claws, being on all fours like a gorilla. Another was a female, being around 5'7". She had not really all that much in top clothing, only a strapless brown shirt that came down to just her above her belly button. It clung to her, however, tightly, so there was no fear of it falling off. She wore tan-colored pants, pieces of armor on her thighs and legs, both ending before they reached the knees. The female wore boots and large gloves, along with also having short white. Her tan eyes showed a lot of anger. Then again, when wasn't she pissed? The final of the three was an old woman, though most wouldn't know it by looking at her. She was around 6'2", having her long black hair in a single ponytail. She was muscular, that much was apparent through her brownish bodysuit. A large zipper went down it, the village of the rock's forehead protector wrapped around her waist. She wore boots as well, of course almost everyone in rock wore boots. You never know what the fuck you would step on in the mountains, either it be a piece of rock or the tail of a 30-foot long snake. You needed to be careful. Though, Naruto don't see how wearing boots could be considered careful against a creature large enough to eat you whole. Naruto took notice that Leaf Nin had been gathering rapidly towards the gate, fearing of what the Rock Nin were capable of. They had good reason to fear them, considering that the large Rock Nin could just summon his version of a puppet and then they all would be screwed over. Though, Naruto wouldn't want that. No, he needed all the man's family puppets to stay undamaged for the war. Looking behind him, Naruto saw that the Iruka was following him, which was actually funny since he was being latched onto by the Kyuubi and Sukoi, later person still pissed and former person just closing her eyes. Naruto, turning his attention back towards his destination, could hear them arguing. "Damn it, give Naruto-sama back now," yelled the female, being restricted by the man. She, even for her skinny frame, was able to give the oversized man some trouble. "We'll destroy this place if we fucking have to." "Tori, calm down," the man said, looking over at Hinata who was just standing there and watching the scene unfold in front of her. "Please return the rock cage, we can treat any wounds he might have." "Yes, and we'd prefer not to fight over this," the older woman stated, Tori looking up at them with a glare. Traitors. Both the old woman and the man looked down at her. "Actually, we're just following Naruto-sama's orders to an extent," the woman stated, looking over at the man. "Right, Tsuji, exactly," the man stated, glancing over at Hinata once more. "We just want our cage back, after that, we'll leave, alright?" Hinata, lost by this, wondered with what she should say to them, how she should answer. She was filling in for Tsunade after all, since said woman was busy setting up a defense with the other shinobi. All Hinata thought was for Naruto to be here and deal with this himself. "I would usually say some funny comment about the situation right about now, but meh." "Tori, you and Tsuji, shut up already," Naruto ordered, said three people looking over at him, the two females of the group's faces brightening at the sight of him, Tsuji just grinning a bit. "Kage-sama, God, I hate being called that. Just call me Naruto like I've told you to," Naruto stated, seeing them drop their head a bit. Naruto shook his head, looking over the three for a moment. "Why are you guys here anyway? I told you to stay in rock." Tori's face brightened at this question. "We came to save you." By walking into a city with at least 50 or so times the number of nin you have in your group. Yeah, the cage bunchin thing was nice for trying to trick them, but only good for a certain amount of time. Naruto asked, raising his eyebrow at the nin. They stalled for a moment, not thinking of anything to retaliate with to defend themselves. Pitying them a bit, he let his face soften slightly. "Just go home, alright? I'll be gone for a few months, just to tell you." No arguing. Naruto then turned his back to them, walking back into the confines of Konoha. Also, I don't appreciate you trying to order Hinata-chan around, he stated, looking over his shoulder at them. The rock nin looked at him in a confused manner, Naruto motioning his head over to Hinata to point her out. They froze for a moment before appearing right before her. Please excuse us, Hinata-sama, we didn't know it was you, Yuen stated, all three of them taking a bow in front of her. We're really sorry. Of course, through this entire thing Hinata was once again clueless, looking over at Naruto for help. Naruto, smiling at the scene, just continued on his way back to Konoha, stopping when he felt something shake in one of his scroll hoisters. Reaching into it, he pulled out a scroll that was slightly glowing blue. Well, that's interesting, Naruto thought, his eyes narrowing at how the light was starting to thin even more. Author: well, that's it for now. Please read and review Lions and Tigers and Golems. Author: welp, after playing Disgaea 2 for a while, I have to say this is one of the best random games I have ever played. That, and I can make an army of cat girls, penguins, golems, maniacal laughter, all of them able to reach level 99. It's beautiful. And as to why this chapter is late, well, I felt like being lazy this week. XP. Prison Dragon. Well, what can I say? I give you points for finding out about Irvine, though I was being a little too open about it. XD of. What? Well, that's another matter. Gaara, well, you'll see him eventually. The trio, look at Gaara answer for more details. Razi the player, yeah, well, all the other countries have had their chance. I've put little Tom nothing on rock yet. Thanks for reviewing. THEDISTURBEDONE 666,666. Everything is an illusion. How do you know I really exist? How do you know that your computer really exists? How do you know that you exist? Twilight Zone theme plays in the background. Then again, we don't really give a damn to begin with, so meh. Thanks for reviewing. ANIDRAGON77. Yeah, that's great to know after putting so much work into it. .xd well, actually, most of it came to mind a few seconds after watching a movie or two. It helped get my hyperactive mind to go into overdrive, thus this fic was born. His review is over at the first story on the trio. Well, it's not like they're not going to help, but Naruto would rather save his resources for later. By what I mean by that, I'll let you lose sleep over it as you think about it at night. Kai Dragoon. I tend to think he's 50-50. It's two very hot women wanting to be with you, but not sharing at the same time, causing them to fight and use their very powerful abilities. Yeah, I'm going to have fun torturing Naruto with this. Anyway, this chapter should have more humor in it than others, needed to lighten things up a little before going on to other chapters. Disclaimer: I do not own anything, so yeah, enjoy the fic. Lions and tigers and golems. Naruto ran through the forests, jumping from tree to tree while increasing his speed. This was bad. One of the biggest political tools was just kidnapped from the village. The fact that he was going to be used to help get the other nations to side with them, they would not let him go. Thus, the reason why he, Akami, Temari, Shikamaru, and two of the sound team were with them, Kin and Duzo. Worst thing was that, from what Shikamaru told him, the woman that took him was freaking nuts. It's not that Naruto wanted to use the kid as a bargaining chip, but right now he didn't really have a choice. Honestly, they were only going to send two at the most, not a carrier itself. They must be becoming more blunt with their objective. They were going to wait for the war to finish, but since Naruto decided to quit halfway through their project, they probably figured out what he was planning. That and the microscopic robotic sentries floating in the air right now. Shaking his head, Naruto wanted to stay focused on his objective right now. Getting Irvine back would not only seal the deal for getting Sand Village to help them, but also missed as well, so retrieving him is more of a priority at the moment. Afterwards he can try to figure out how to get the remaining villages to help as well. They were going to need all the resources available to them if they wanted to make it through this. Pumping more chakra into his leg, Naruto increased his speed once more, much to the displeasure of his comrades. They had been chasing this woman for about 4 hours now, and they still could not catch up to her. Who the fuck was this woman? Being able to keep even outrun him at 45% chakra boost. He couldn't run faster, considering the others were at their max running speed, and just barely able to keep up. How he knew they were just able to keep up, you ask? Considering how hard they're panting and the sweat they're working up, Naruto had a pretty good idea of how much longer they could keep up with him. "Fuck this cage bunshin no jutsu," Naruto stated, his copies flying backwards behind the group. A few seconds later, he heard several gasps and witnessed his clones run ahead of him while giving the others piggyback rides. Naruto, grinning like a madman, increased the amount of chakra pumping into his legs by 65%, his speed increasing greatly. His body blurred as he ran through the trees at blazing speeds to catch up to his copies as he continued to follow the woman. Well, not literally, considering he would burn the forest down if he did run at blazing speeds, but you get the point. "Wait," Naruto commanded, his shadow clones stopping in their tracks. Well, actually, considering they had used up all their energy, they disappeared, everyone that was being carried by a shadow clone, dropping to the ground. Surprisingly the first to get up, Shikamaru looked over at Naruto with a confused expression. Everyone else, in case you're wondering, were busy trying to grasp where they were, not being able to keep up or barely able to keep up with the Bunshin's speed. "So, why exactly did you have us stop and cause our rides to poof out of existence?" Shikamaru asked, Naruto looking over his shoulder at him. "Take a look for yourself," Naruto stated, Shikamaru's expression changing to a curious one as he walked over towards what Naruto was looking at. Sighing when he finally saw through the genjutsu, Shikamaru looked back at him. "Do we have to go through that? It seems too troublesome," Shikamaru asked while Naruto undid the genjutsu that kept it hidden. What they were now standing before was a large, very large canyon-sized area full of trees. The woman probably sunk some of the land in fire country with earth jutsu to have an advantage against them. Now, Naruto could no longer state that they had the element of surprise. Nope, now they were fucked, having to walk right into the enemy's territory to get back Irvine. Naruto looked back at Shikamaru with an amused smile. "Well, if you don't want to go that bad, then you can always explain to them," Naruto pointed towards Akami and Temari, "about how you plan to leave Irvine behind because you don't feel like going through the area. God have mercy on your soul if you do." "I think I've changed my mind," Shikamaru stated, looking over to see that the others had been took the time to get in a little more rest before heading towards them. "Come on, we're pressed for time." With that, Shikamaru jumped into the canyon, running down the walls towards the bottom. Temari looking at Naruto, curious of the new behavior. "What's gotten into him?" she asked, Naruto shrugging at the question. "Who knows, maybe, just maybe he's realized the value of teamwork. Bullshit. Hey, if you say so," Naruto replied to her, backflipping into the canyon, twisting around and landing on the wall, running down it like Shikamaru towards the bottom. Everyone else stalled for a moment, jumping into the canyon a second later after them. "So why aren't we jumping through the trees like usual?" Kin asked, Naruto sighing and looking back at her. "We aren't jumping through the trees like usual because we have no clue about what the enemy did to the area," Naruto stated, taking out a kunai and throwing it at a nearby tree. It went halfway through the tree before hitting one of the leaves. A second later, the leaf exploded, setting off a chain reaction that caused all the other leaves in the tree to explode as well. The vibration of the tree caused the others to shake, a leaf falling down from another one for the trees. Naruto appeared right below the leaf, couching beneath, blowing it upwards towards the sky. The leaf then exploded as well. Naruto looked over at the others from his couched position. "Still want to jump through the trees?" he asked, everyone else shaking their heads in response to his answer. "Good, now shall we continue?" Naruto then turned around, preparing to continue through the forest, stopping when he felt something. Naruto jumped backwards, dodging a rather large fist that was slammed towards the ground, causing tea to shatter and for a few trees to fall towards the ground as well. Explosions rained through the forest, Naruto taking the time to regroup with the others mainly standing in front of them and waiting for the explosions to end. Looking back, he saw that the Kin and Dosu seemed to be unharmed by the explosion, Temari using her fan to block the gust of winds, while Akami and Shikamaru stood behind it with her. Naruto then turned his attention back towards what had attacked them. It was a golem, from what Naruto could see, an oversized statue that only knew how to crush other things. It had scorch marks from the explosions, seemingly unharmed from by them at all. Naruto mentally cursed when he saw multiple versions of golems reach out of the ground and pull themselves to the surface. "Well, we're screwed," Kin stated, preparing some explosions for fighting the golems. Even if the explosions from before didn't work, she still needed to use them. It was better than nothing after all. Looking over at Dosu, he had already thrown his cloak off, or was it blown off by the explosion, who knows, and was preparing his speakers for firing. Akami and Temari also preparing to attack the golems as well. apparently. You guys mind taking care of these guys while I get Irvine back? Naruto asked, looking over at the others to see them getting ready. Seems I didn't even need to ask. We'll delay them for now, focus on fighting the woman from before. Akami replied, looking over at Naruto. We'll meet with you later. This is almost like one of those dramatic scenes in an action movie or something, Naruto stated, turning around. Well, see you guys later and try not to die, alright? Naruto then ran onward, moving towards the woman that had become a kidnapper, but if she were old enough, a pedophile, what? It was possible, especially in this day and age. Shaking his head, Naruto could hear the sounds of fighting going on behind him. He wondered if they were going to be fine taking on something about 3 times their size, having the strength to match Irvine's. How he would know this? Well, it's not the first time he's seen a golem. Probably won't be his last either. Damn, did those bastards know how to hit, and depending on the situation, bitches. Sighing, Naruto looked back to see if they were doing alright, his face going blank. Shikamaru, what are you doing? Naruto asked as said person continued to catch up to him. Shikamaru just yawned and cleaned out one of his ears, looking over at Naruto with a dull expression. I didn't feel like fighting. So, why are you following me again? 1. We need to get Irvine back, and you might need backup too. You seem strong enough to take her out on your own. Thus, I won't have to do a damn thing, Shikamaru stated, Naruto sweat dropping at what Shikamaru said. Then how are you backing me up? I'm here for moral support, Shikamaru replied, as they both continued to jump through the leafless trees, exchange words between one another, heading towards their destination and target. I never thought about it like that before, Naruto stated, looking over at Shikamaru in shock. I still can't believe it. You would be amazed at how effective it is, Shikamaru replied, yawning a bit and stretching. The next time you're in that kind of situation, you should use the information. Looking around the canyon, he could see a mist filling into the area. You sure it's alright to walk? Didn't we already go through this? You can run in the trees if you want, but if your ass gets fried by an explosion, it's not my problem. Besides, the woman's bound to take the bait anyway, Naruto stated, also looking around the area. Seems she already has. Naruto quickly spun around, slamming his fist into the woman. She flew backwards, disappearing in a puff of smoke a second later. Shikamaru drew his katana, getting into a position to defend himself while Naruto followed suit. When they both heard maniacal laughter, their expressions dropped, Shikamaru's expression changing when he remembered something. Hey Naruto, pay up, I told you she was going to be the cliché nut job villain. All she did was laugh. Almost all villains do that nowadays. Hell, for all we know, this could be a misunderstanding. You forgot about the golems, didn't you? Oh yeah, Shikamaru sighed, looking over towards the side of the canyon. He shifted his katana a bit, his shadow wrapping around it, bringing it to his left. Shikamaru slashed his katana in the direction of the canyon wall, his shadow expanding and shooting towards it. The shadow struck it, rocks falling towards the ground as the canyon wall itself almost collapsed due to the strength of attack. A figure jumped out from the sides, throwing several waves of kunai at them. Shikamaru deflected most of them, Naruto unlucky enough to be hit by one of them. What caught the woman off guard was when Naruto disappeared in a puff of smoke. Surprised? Naruto asked, slamming his foot downwards into the woman's shoulder, sending her flying towards the ground. She spun, landing on all fours and jumping out of the way of Shikamaru's attack, both people sending a wave of kunai towards her. The woman spun in midair, blocking the kunai with what looked like claws. Naruto's expression shifted when he saw the claws. Well, that explains why she's so easy to beat the shit out of, Naruto thought, rushing over towards the woman and kneeing her in the stomach, slamming his elbow downwards into her head and causing her to crash into the ground. Shikamaru sighed in relief when he saw that the woman's head crushed inwards. Now that we've killed her, let's find her. Naruto, what are you doing? Shikamaru asked, watching Naruto set the woman's body up in a standing position. Actually, he put it in a very interesting pose, ducking and hiding his body behind the woman's. Hey, Shikamaru-kun, want to find out how many licks it takes to get to the center? Naruto used his other hand to move the woman's body, having it blow a kiss at him. Shikamaru just stood there, wondering what the hell was wrong with him. Naruto waited for a moment, his head popping up from behind the woman. Wait, you haven't figured it out that this is a golem? A golem? Shikamaru asked, sweat dropping a bit. Naruto nodding in confirmation. He then quickly glanced over the area, trying to find out where the real one could be. She's probably hiding around here somewhere. Thought I could force her out by pissing her off, but you plan to make her golem hit on me? At least look like it. Might have worked well, not really, but I still wanted to do it," Naruto stated, laughing his ass off. Shikamaru brought his hand up to his face, bringing it down and looking at Naruto in disbelief. How could someone this childish be a Kage? Shikamaru would never know. She's going to counter soon. But to think someone so young being able to make golems, Naruto stated, looking over the lifeless one in his arms. Most people practice for years and never been able to make a copy like this. Most golem users are in their 30s. You sure she's still in her teens? She looked from 17 to 19. Well, those were just her looks. She could use something like that Tsunade-sama. How about we bet on it? If she's below 20 years old, you win. If she's 20 and above, I win. Deal? Naruto asked, extending his hand at Shikamaru. Shikamaru thought for a moment before extending his hand out and shaking Naruto's hand in agreement. Good, now that's settled this time. Let's kill her and be done with it, Naruto stated, looking forwards towards the end of the canyon. You don't have any problem with that, right? Naruto asked as the woman walked towards them, a grin slowly forming on her face. Author: well, that's just about it. Please read and review. Things begin to move forward. Author: nothing much has happened, though tis disappointed in reviews. Even if it is my fault. N-I-D-R-A-G-O-N-77. Both yes and no, you'll just have to continue to read to find out. XD, thanks for reviewing. Rozzy the player. Golems, I love them so much, they're so great, and Dizgia too. Seriously, thanks for reviewing, though I think with everything I've put in this story, it might not have been that hard to figure out. Disclaimer, I do not own anything yet, you already know this. Enjoy the fic. Things begin to move forward, the clock is set. The woman walked towards them, a grin slowly forming on her face. Naruto, who seemed a little too confident to Shikamaru, was just returning her grin. He wondered if after everything he supposedly happened to him, that Naruto had completely snapped. This would defiantly screw them over, considering all the advantages that the enemy had against them. Shikamaru could only assume a fighting position and hope for the best, which was surprisingly optimistic for him. Yeah, he had been hanging around these people too long. A nice cloud session after this would fix this problem. To his surprise, he didn't have to lift a finger. No, for some reason the woman just grabbed her head all of a sudden and fell towards the ground, screaming in pain. Shikamaru looked over at Naruto, who was shaking his head slowly at the sight. Walking over, Naruto performed a few seals and whispered something, a few feathers falling on the woman. A second later, she was on the ground out cold. You know, you didn't have to make it that hard on her, Naruto stated, looking towards the side. A man walked out of a part of the forest, his black cloak flowing a bit in the breeze that blew by. All of a sudden, the man looked down at the woman, his Sharingan in full power. It was necessary. Itachi-sensei, please refrain from giving people permanent nightmares that will convert her mentally back to a 4-year-old. Naruto replied, looking down at the female. Crouching, he picked up the woman and tossed her onto his shoulder. Actually, I'll be needing that woman, Naruto, Itachi stated, Naruto showing a confused expression that quickly changed when he finally pieced things together. She's a mythical, isn't she? Naruto asked, Itachi nodding in confirmation. So, what project is she from? Gorgon and Irvine? Hercules. Speaking of which, Itachi went over towards one of the trees, picking up something and putting out into plain view. I'm guessing you'll want this back? Itachi asked, tossing Irvine over towards Naruto. Naruto looked down at Irvine to see he's sleeping soundly. He sighed, turning his attention back over towards Itachi. You want something, don't you? Naruto replied, Itachi taking a scroll out and tossing it over to him. Naruto catching it with ease. This it? That's it. Make sure it gets to her as soon as possible, Itachi stated, thinking about something and looking over at Naruto, more specifically, the woman he was now carrying. On second thought, I think I may take the woman too. Naruto just stared at him with a blank expression. Right, well, the answer is no. I have no clue what you may do to this girl. You may try to molest her or something. Itachi's expression now showed the same blank one that Naruto had earlier. It was a joke, Itachi. You joke failed, Itachi stated, glancing back over at the woman. I would usually fight you over this, but I don't have the time. I'll just tell them I killed her by accident or something. Itachi-sensei, you never have accidents. That's the reason why I included or something, Itachi replied, turning his back towards Naruto and walking towards the woods. Just make sure that the scroll gets to her. With that, Itachi jumped into the trees and headed towards wherever he needed to be. You're probably wondering why Itachi wasn't being blown straight to hell by jumping on the trees and touching the leaves, right? Well, there's many explanations as to why that's possible, the most popular probably being that he's too skilled to be caught by a simple trap. Naruto watched his sensei fly head towards his next checkpoint, looking down at Irvine and picking him up when Itachi was out of sight. "You coming, Shikamaru?" Naruto asked, Shikamaru snapping to when he realized that someone hadn't forgotten about him. "I mean." They went through the entire conversation without him even speaking once. Shikamaru just kinda expected that with Naruto's personality, that he would have forgotten about him. "Yeah, sure," Shikamaru stated as Naruto nodded and headed towards Konoha. Shikamaru started walking in that direction as well, stopping when Naruto suddenly stopped and turned around to face him. "You carry Irvine?" Yeah, that defiantly sucked, in Shikamaru's opinion anyway. It had been around an hour since the fight with the woman, apparently the others having gone back to the village ahead of time. More like being summoned back by the sixth since Naruto had already sent a bird to tell them that they had retrieved Irvine. Yeah, it was going to be a pain in the ass for Naruto gets back. Fortunately, he shoved Irvine off onto Shikamaru, who was most likely going to get ravaged as the others try to get Irvine from him. 10-1, he was probably going to throw the body at the people, but then again he was probably too lazy to do even that. Naruto felt the woman stir, her body shifting as she finally awoken. Another reason why he didn't want to carry Irvine. Who knows what the fuck this woman would do once she woke up. Better to have them at a distance than anything else. Things were about to get entertaining for him. Now if only Irvine would wake up as well. "Have a nice nap?" Naruto asked, the woman's head slowly lifting upwards. She seemed to be looking around for something, but considering that she wore a blindfold, he really didn't know what she was doing. She looked over at Shikamaru, or more importantly what he was carrying on his shoulder. "I'm guessing that one of the Akatsuki showed up, correct?" "Well, yes and no, one did show up, but he let you go," Naruto stated, the woman stirring a bit at the confirmation that the Akatsuki had been there. "Mind if I ask what you plan to do with Irvine, or is that too personal?" The woman stirred even more, Shikamaru raising an eyebrow at her. It's none of your business." The woman heard Shikamaru snicker, apparently holding his urge to laugh. Naruto chucked, balancing the woman on his shoulder and tightening his grip. "Also, why can't I move my limbs? Isn't obvious?" Naruto stated, looking over his shoulder slightly at her. "We paralyzed most of your body so that you wouldn't give us too much trouble." "Well, actually, I paralyzed your body," he just watched. Another great thing about having spiders in your system, various chemicals for your use at a moment's notice. "What's wrong with you?" Shikamaru asked, seeing the woman shake constantly. "You used bugs to paralyze me." "Well, it was convenient and you brought it on yourself, and if you don't settle down, I'll have them paralyze you again." Naruto stated, the woman instantly stopping her attempts at getting free. Naruto wondered how long he would have to put up with this, realizing something a few moments later. "By the way, what's your name?" The woman stayed quiet, thinking of whether or not to give it out. "Let me be carried by that guy and I'll tell you," the woman stated, eyeing Irvine. Naruto, knowing full well what she was after, full-heartedly agreed. "Deal. Now, your name?" "It's Ruby." "Why do I have to carry both of them again?" Shikamaru asked, following Naruto towards the village. He honestly wondered how he ended up in this situation. Maybe it was because he tried to take the easy route out of fighting the golems. Yeah, next time, he would be the person to sacrifice himself so that he didn't need to put up with this bullshit. Speaking of bullshit, well, she did ask to be carried by you after all, Naruto stated, looking over his shoulder at Shikamaru. "Look how happy she is." The woman hacked something up and spat it at him, Naruto blocking it with a small log he found near him. It managed to block the spit, but as soon as the spit hit it, the log began to dissolve. In few seconds, the entire log was pretty much gone. Naruto raising an eyebrow at Ruby. "Damn, what the hell did you eat?" Naruto asked, the woman preparing to hack up something else until she felt something crawl on her skin. "Yeah, if you haven't noticed until now, I left a few of my family members on you just in case. I would advise you to behave or else they'd be crawling everywhere on you. You're one perverted bastard, you know that." "Actually, those are female spiders, so it's nothing too big," Naruto stated, somewhat amused at how the female was starting to get pissed. Shikamaru, on the other hand, was not finding their little argument funny at all. He did, however, freeze when he felt the other person he was carrying stir. Naruto looking at Shikamaru questionably. "What is it?" Naruto asked, Shikamaru moving his head towards Irvine. Naruto tilted his head towards the side in confusion, looking over at Irvine to see him moving slightly. "Oh, at a time like this." Naruto walked over towards Shikamaru, taking Irvine off his shoulder and carrying him towards the nearest tree. Wait, is he? Shush, quite you. Naruto ordered, placing Irvine on the ground and laying him back towards the tree, sitting upright. Yeah, he was about to wake up, but what to tell him when he sees them? They'd have to tell him the truth about how he became a freakishly powerful monster that seemingly has enough strength to take on the weaker-tailed demons, and now he's become a bargaining chip in political matters. Most likely for arranged marriages, considering that those that are considered as strong as the tailed demons are known for their stamina. Yeah, it disturbed Naruto whenever he thought about how other nations would form treaties in exchange for boy toys, but that's how it went with about half of the treaties made nowadays. He then thought about letting Shikamaru explain the details. That idea worked. Where am I? Irvine asked, his eyes slowly opening to see Naruto and Shikamaru, the latter carrying someone. What happened? That, my friend, I'll leave Shikamaru to tell you, Naruto stated, Shikamaru glaring intensely at Naruto's back. You can't be serious. Oh, but I am. You see, I have a few things I need to take care of, and now that Irvine's conscious, I don't need to focus on this anymore. So if you'll excuse me. With that, Naruto jumped into the trees, picking up the pace to get to Konoha as fast as possible, leaving Shikamaru to deal with Irvine's confusion and Ruby's bitching apparent acid abilities. Yeah, Naruto almost felt bad for him, really. Naruto ran through the trees as fast as possible, focusing chakra into his legs and making great leaps to increase his distance. Yeah, this, to be honest, was going to screw them over so much. The mythical were apparently still being made even after he attacked their major factories a couple months ago. With how strong most of them were, there was no way in hell they were going to stand a chance. That's, of course, if they managed to tame the mythical. They have their own ideas and dreams, and with their power they could accomplish them. This was going to be troublesome in the future. Flipping and landing on one of the trees, Naruto focused as much chakra as he could into his legs and made one final leap into the village, flying past most of the wreckage and groups of people. Landing in the streets, he caught a few people off guard, stalling for a second and running towards the Hokage tower. It took him a minute or two, but he was able to reach it. Looking towards the top of the tower, Naruto focused chakra into his legs once more and jumped to the very top of the tower. Taking a moment to breath, he looked over at the person, the new Hokage, seeing her stare off into space. Did you manage to retrieve Irvine? Tsunade asked, not even turning to face Naruto. Yes, we were able to retrieve him and the woman that took him, Naruto stated, Tsunade continuing to stare out into the village, or what was left of it anyway. Slowly, she turned towards him, her face showing that she was in no mood for games. So tell me, Naruto, what did you have planned for Konoha? What I have planned for all the villages to combine as a united front against them, Naruto stated, Tsunade narrowing her eyes at him. But do you think you can accomplish it? Tsunade asked, her worried expression seemingly dropping when she saw Naruto's famous grin. We won't know until we try, right? Author, welp, here it is, please read and review. Leaving a home, a village, a memory. Author, welp, I don't really have any excuse for why it's late. I actually forgot this time. XD. THEDISTURBEDONE 666,666. Well, I like to think of it like this, any shorter, and it would be crap pie, any longer, and I wouldn't be able to get it out weekly. XD be glad for what you have. To be honest, the mythicals just came to me at one point, like everything else in this fic. It just kinda snapped to me in an instant, and I reshaped it into something usable. Rozzy the player. Wouldn't we all, my friend, wouldn't we all? Thanks for reviewing. Vid. Yeah, first older Naruto chapter, at least it doesn't make him look like an asshole for destroying it just for a mission. As for Ruby's age, you'll find that out eventually. Not sure if I should do a part on Sasuke finding out about Itachi. I'll think about it a bit. Might be interesting to type. ANIDRAGON77. Indeed, though I can't get it out every few days, the least I can do is get it out weekly. Stuff being explained. That reminds me about a few things I need to do for the story. Anyway, thanks for reviewing. Mage Ronin. Well, it's nice to see how you're lobing it. XD. Yeah, sorry about that. I'm not one to talk when it comes to spelling, so it's good compared to how mine would have been like Olving if I typed too fast. Anyway, thanks for reviewing. Girl of Light Writer. So close to making my awesome names list. You're so close. Anyway, take your time. This fic's not going anywhere, as long as you mark it in some form or manner, so you can read it at any time. Just relax, kick back one day, and read over the thing when you have nothing better to do. I had something else to say, but now I've forgotten it. Crap. Anyway, on to the fanfiction. Disclaimer: I do not own anything yet. Enjoy the fic. Leaving a home, a village, a memory. It had been a few days after the event with Ruby, Irvine being retrieved, and the person mentioned before being detained. Since then, the people of Konoha, per the 6th Hokage's order, have been gather everything useful that they could find. All the supplies were gathered through the last few days, were sorted out, calculated on the amount of each supply, and stored till they were ready to leave. Yes, you heard read right, leave Konoha. I mean, come on, the village itself is destroyed. They have just gone through a war with the other countries and were attacked by an unidentified enemy. To be honest, most of the citizens considered themselves lucky to have made it through all of this, others wondering what hell was going to come to pass next. Crappy and 1-hour made wagons were lined up, being pulled by whatever animals they could find in that short period of time, half of them being summons, half of them being animals from Konoha's reserve station. The station itself was made in case something like this, well, not exactly like this, were to happen. It held access supplies and would help Konoha out in its time of need. It was being completely emptied, the Anbu squad that looked over it being reside as soon as possible. Take note that the only other time that the station needed to be completely emptied was after the Kyuubi had assaulted Konoha. Naruto looked through the wagons, making sure everything was properly fastened, and once more, well, that's what most people though he was doing. In reality, he was letting a few of his spiders into the wagons. Might as well have a backup defense for them, but at the same time not have the citizens depend on it. Sure, the Anmu and the jackals were helping out, but still, you could never be too careful. Well, actually, you could, and Naruto has a really funny story about what happened this one time, but that can be saved for later. I wonder how much time we have now, Naruto thought, slipping a few spiders into the next wagon and moving on to the next. Up until this point he had been able to predict their moves, but now that he knew about the mythicals, he wasn't too sure anymore. He thought he had killed them all off, but now hell, even Konoha officially had one. Naruto was having mixed feelings about either letting Irvine live or killing him. These two feelings mixed with what had happened in the past 2 weeks. Yeah, he was having a horrible time. Deciding to think about it later, Naruto began to place a few more spiders into the last wagon. They were staying near the very bottom, so it would take them a few seconds to get to the top if something should happen. Another reason why they were only going to be backup, since they would really get out in time to do much of anything. Satisfied that the spiders were in place, Naruto turned around to face the person that was behind him. Hello Slaw, what is it that you need? Naruto asked, looking behind him and facing said person. It wasn't really Slaw himself that mattered, but what he had in his hands. What did she do now? Nothing, Commander, Slaw stated, looking down at Adage, who he was cradling in his arm. What do you plan to do with this child now that the war has started? Slaw asked, Naruto not even sure himself on that one. Thinking about it, there was no way he could ask anyone to take care of her or do it himself with how messy things had gotten. Everyone from the village was going to be working extremely hard in the next couple of months, so no one would have the strength to handle such a little devil like her. Actually, I think I have an idea about where she can go, Naruto stated. Slaw, are you aware of the Eternia? Yes, I am aware of it. Would you mind contacting it and taking Adage to its location? Even if it is a warship, it's still better than most villages at this point, Naruto explained, walking up to Slaw and smiling down at Adage. Make sure she arrives there safely for me. Understood, Squad 4. In a few seconds, 4 jackals appeared out of nowhere, all kneeling before Slaw and Naruto. Contact the Eternia and let it know ahead of time that we're bringing a small child for it to take care of. Move out. With that, all of the jackals disappeared from sight, Slaw and Adage along with them. Naruto, smiling at how he had one less thing to worry about, made his way over towards the Hokage tower, planning on having a little talk with the strategists there about how to keep the citizens out of harm's way. Even if they were a bunch of stuck-up bastards. You really going to be following me all day? Irvine asked, looking back at Akami. She, for some reason, seemed to not be in a good mood. Well, only people that have spent enough time around an Aburum would be able to realize when they were pissed, sad, happy since their face rarely shows any emotion. It's an order from the Hokage, she stated, picking up her pace to where she was right beside Irvine as they walked through the ruins of the village. I'll be following you until she says otherwise. Irvine looked at her with a raised eyebrow. Everywhere, keep your perverted thoughts to yourself and the minimum in general. Irvine raised his hands defensively. I didn't mean it like th. Irvine. Irvine turned in time to just see a fan before it was slammed into his face, sending him towards the wall from a destroyed building. A crash was heard. Irvine now laying in the middle of some rubble from the leftover wall, his eyes swirling a bit. Shaking his head, he managed to snap himself out of it and looked to find Tamari staring down at him. "So what exactly did you say to her?" Tamari asked, Irvine waving his hands in defense. "She said that she was ordered to follow me everywhere and I asked if it were true." "Alright," Irvine stated hastily, Tamari continuing to stare down at him. A few seconds later, she let the expression drop and let a smile form, offering her hand to help him up. Sighing in relief, Irvine took her hand and was pulled to his feet. "Thank you," Irvine said, letting go of Tamari's hand and snapping his back. "Ouch. Stop being such a baby about it," Tamari replied, looking back at Akami. "So, your mission is to go everywhere that he goes, right?" "In general, yes." "Good, then you two will be coming with me," Tamari stated, grabbing Irvine's arm. "We're going to see Kankuro." Irvine looked over at Tamari with a blank expression. "I thought Kankuro-sensei was still in the Sand Village?" Irvine asked, Tamari grinning evilly. "He is, and that's exactly where we're going. All three of us," Tamari stated, Irvine's expression dropping as he just stared at her blankly. "You have got to be kidding me." "No, for some reason the Hokage is having you sent to Suna for protection while they relocate," Tamari stated, looking over at Akami. "And because of your orders, you're going too." Akami and Irvine looked at each other, Irvine sighing at the thought of what was going to happen. "Alright, but first, I need to do something," Irvine stated, freeing himself from Tamari and walking forward a bit. "You're free to come if you want." Tamari shrugged, going up and walking next to Irvine. Akami also walked with them, but a little less behind them than beside. She was supposed to be protecting them after all. "This is what you needed to do?" Tamari asked her and Akami. Watching Irvine search through the various pieces of rubble of one building, Irvine moved another piece of a wall, tossing it to the side and continuing to work. "Well, I need to salvage what I can from it," Irvine explained, continuing to search through the building's wreckage. "You know, I just thought of something." Irvine brought his hands up into a single seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 3 clones appeared, all beginning to search for whatever it was that Irvine was looking for. A few minutes later, one of them managed to find something. Irvine, immediately tossing what he was holding into a nearby pile, ran over to the clone. One large piece of building was left, apparently sitting on something. Irvine and one clone went to the side of the piece, Irvine pumping chakra into his arms to be able to lift the piece, flipping it over. The dust flared up a bit before settling down and revealing what was underneath the wreckage. It was a door, of course, one that was crushed halfway through. The chunk of building they had just lifted off probably came down hard on the door, smashing it a bit. Irvine pumped some more chakra, slamming his hand down into the door and breaking it open. Looking down into the door, he smiled at what was in it. "Thank Kami-sama, nothing's been broken." With that, Irvine then jumped into the room. Tamari and Akami running over to see what had happened. They stared down into the room, seeing quite a bit. "What do you think?" Irvine asked, looking around the room. "It's the storage for my store. Might be useful for everyone here." "Well, not everyone," Irvine stated, looking at a few boxes and cases in the corner. Hearing something outside, Irvine went back up the ladder of the room and popped his head out the door. "Oh, Tenten-chan. Would you mind helping me out a bit?" Irvine asked, looking at Tenten in a pleading manner. Tenten smiled at the request. "That's what I'm here for," Tenten replied, looking at Akami and Tamari. "You two going to help?" Tamari shrugged, walking over to Irvine and helping him lift the first box out. Staggering a bit at how heavy it was, she placed it to the side and helped with the next. Akami, who just stood there for a moment watching them, flinched for a moment before walking over to them. Tenten raised an eyebrow at the flinch. "Is that Akami's version of a shrug?" "Hinata-chan, wake up." Hinata shifted in her sleep, getting more comfortable on her oversized pillow. She was apparently having a good dream, considering the small smile on her face. Her breathing was light, her hands grabbing the pillow softly, said pillow sighing at this. Shifting himself once again, he looked back down at Hinata. "Hinata-chan, wake up, we need to be leaving soon." 5 more minutes, Naruto-kun. The pillow sweat dropped, deciding to hell with it and standing up, Hinata's body falling to the ground. Quickly getting back up, Hinata glared at her oversized pillow. "You could have been a little more gentler, Asuna," Hinata stated, Asuna just looking over at her and showing his teeth a bit in what appeared to be a grin. "If I was, you would have been left behind by the others," Asuna replied, stretching his body and letting out a loud yawn before returning to his original stance. "I know that you pulled an all-nighter, but even then, you still have to get up for guard duty." Actually, I was wondering if I could ride on your back while we head for the location. Can I please? Hinata asked, looking at Asuna with an extremely cute expression and bringing her hands together in front of her. Asuna, unable to take it, looked away from Hinata. Hinata went over towards where Asuna was looking, continuing to make the face and wait for his answer. Asuna once again looked in the other direction. Fine, but if you fall asleep I'm going to pry you off me one way or another, Asuna stated, wondering how much of what he said was actually going to happen. Yes, Hinata shouted, grabbing Asuna's neck and hugging him. Thank you so much. Hinata hugged Asuna tighter, Asuna not even affected by the strength to be honest, he had even more strength than her. So she could be trying to crush him, and it would one feel like a tight hug. After a minute, Hinata finally let go of the beast. She then turned around and headed towards the wagons. Anyway, where is this location that Naruto is taking us to? Asuna asked, running up to Hinata and walking beside her. I don't know, to be honest, he hasn't told anyone besides Tsunade-sama, Hinata stated, looking at the wagons and how crappy they were. I'm still wondering if those things are even going to be able to make it. Even with the station, they didn't have much in the way of transportation. Only a few good wagons and that was it. Asuna replied, be glad that we even have those. Still, it's going to be difficult to transport civilians with how limited and undermanned we are. Can't we ask for help from one of our supposed allies? Asuna asked, Hinata shaking her head. No, Naruto-kun stated that he didn't want any of the other nations to know the location of the new village just yet. Something about being prepared for the war that was coming and getting everything ready. Besides, our allies are probably also preparing for the war as well, Hinata said, Asuna looking over the area. True, it's better to get the village up and running before the war. That may take some time. Regardless, we'll have to do what we can to survive from now on. Having no village means no strong protection against attacks. Well, actually, the wool didn't last 3 minutes to be honest, but it still bought us some time. We're going to have to be extremely careful from now on, Hinata explained, walking over towards the wagons. Seeing them begin to move, Hinata froze. Ready to go? Asuna asked, Hinata watching the front wagons begin to leave the area of Konoha, or what was left of it, looking back at Konoha one more time. Hinata looked forward at the wagons leaving, beginning towards with the wagon she had been assigned to guard. As I'll ever be, Asuna, as I'll ever be. Author, you know, I was thinking about making another fic, one dedicated to our favorite fattest Choji. You never see Choji's grand adventure, so I thought I might give him one. Please read and review. A new home, a new start, a new goal. Author, well, great news, I made a new story for the Naruto universe, it being Naruto x Tsunami. You can either find it in the search bar by its name by the name of Spiral, or just click my author's profile to find it, or, since the Naru x Tsunami section is so small, you could just search for it. It's the second story currently there XD. Vid. Yeah, most people just skip the preparations and get to the fighting, which is only just spamming of jutsus, Rasengan Chidori in various forms. Kinda makes me sad, really. ANIDRAGON77. Asuna is the huge ass white tiger that scared the shit out of Lee and his, and Hinata's match smiles brightly. Girl of light writer, exactly, that's how it's supposed to feel. Slowly coming together anyway. I hate stories that pretty much give away everything in the beginning, then try to change it halfway through, because they've gotten bored of the first idea. I honestly don't know when I'll write the guide. I have a tendency to be lazy even with this story. The only reason it's good is because I have the ability to get everything that I need to across in less than 6 pages a chapter, each being around 3,000 words most of the time. I'll make the guide eventually, possibly in a few short weeks, if I ever stop being lazy. Razi the player. I always wondered that as well. Maybe it was some tradition of some kinda, or maybe, because a lot of people were ninjas, they just decided that because of this that the village was hidden from the naked eye. I wonder what the Hokages who thought of this were on. Miscellaneous soldier. I think you see it this chapter, not sure, well, the location of the village anyway. I go by the number I set for them, so I'll need to check. If you like my writing, then go read the new story, sure you would enjoy it, though the plot is completely different from this one XD. Hasabusa, you'll learn about those eventually. Hell, the first one I think is going to be answered here, though it's not a location that anyone's familiar with. Disclaimer, I do not own Naruto or anything, expect my own original stories which are on another site. Enjoy the fic. A new home, a new start, a new goal. It had been a week since the entire remaining village of Konoha left in search of a place to reconstruct their village. They were still in fire country, of course, it was just that the citizens were slowing them down. The number of citizens was too large for them to go on ahead of them and prepare the place, even with the help of the jackals. It was becoming a chore for them, but still worth it if what Naruto said was true about the area they were going to. Now in a forest, the group of people were heading towards a large cliff, looking up on it with interest. Naruto had stated that this cliff was going to be part of their new home, but he didn't give exact details. All they could think of was that the cliff served as protection against invaders. It seemed capable enough of protecting them. Then again, so did the walls around Konoha. Reaching the cliff, everyone looked up at it. Naruto, who was in the front of everyone, stepped towards the cliff. Lifting his hand up, he scanned over it. Finding what he was looking for, he pressed a switch and a very large pathway opened up. Naruto, grinning slightly, signed for the people to continue onwards. They did, slowly at first, unsure of what was going to happen. Naruto was once again in front of them, leading the way through the twists and turns in the very badly lighted cavern. Most people guessed that the lights were made by Naruto at some point, most anyway. They moved through it for about half an hour, the final few people moving through the door and it closing behind them. All they could do, apparently, was move forward. The shinobi outside of the entrance at the time simply ran up the cliff. They had already been instructed on how to reach the area. Back to the group, the front of them had finally reached the exit of the cave. Naruto's grin grew slightly, seeing the sun shining brightly down on them. It was always good to enjoy the simple things in life like that. They were currently in front of what looked like a forest, nothing out of the ordinary. The people thought that the forest would be the new home they were promised. Naruto looking at them and shaking his head, saying that they were almost there. Turning around, he began to walk towards the forest, the people following behind him. The sun shining through the trees, showing the beautiful scenery, seemed to calm the people down a bit, which is exactly what Naruto hoped for. If they got too excited, they may try to run ahead and see the next star without him guiding him. When they reached said area, Naruto turned around and explained what they were going to do to a few people, having them spread it around the refuges. He waited for about 10 or so minutes, the people coming back and telling him that they informed everyone. Nodding, he made his way down the path that had been in the forest. It was really a perfect place to hide them, really. A high wall to guard them and a forest that had 2 sections to confuse the enemy. Add in a few traps and a new wall on the cliff, and they'd set. What Naruto meant by 2 sections is that the forest had a miniature canyon in it, the trees in second canyon, growing as tall as the ones outside of the canyon. Basically, since the trees reached the same height, it just looked like a regular forest. So no one would really search it first. If they were looking for them, they might out of chance, but that was a different story. Reaching the bottom of the canyon with the front of the group of civilians, Naruto could not help but smile at their awe. The canyon was extremely beautiful, the light shining down and reflecting off the trees almost perfectly. The sounds around them as the animals went on with their daily lives. This would be difficult for people to get used to in the beginning, but after that, they would love this place as much as he loved it. Motioning for a few nins to come forward, he told them that they had arrived at the location and for the people to begin gathering further into the canyon. They ran off as fast as they could to spread the news, their excitement becoming apparent. Naruto then summoned a few large spiders to look over the area. He already knew that there wasn't much in this canyon that could harm them, but still better to be safe than sorry. The people began to pick up their pace coming down the canyon wall and towards their new home. Naruto hoped that they kept that enthusiasm, considering that they were going to be doing quite a bit of work from now on. "You planning on giving a speech?" Naruto asked, turning towards the person that had been observing him for a while now, said person smiling sheepishly at him. "Actually, I was hoping you would do it," Tsunade stated, her sheepish smile growing. "I mean, it was you that lead everyone here after all." "No thanks," Naruto replied, turning around and walking away from Tsunade. Tsunade quickly ran up to him, walking right beside him. "Come on, you know that you want to. This was your idea to begin with anyway," Tsunade said, Naruto looking over at her. "I know you're just trying to be lazy about it, but if you want, I can make you some cue cards." "That's not funny. Life's not either, deal with it," Naruto said, jumping into a nearby tree. "Besides, using my rank as Kage as an excuse to do your work shows weakness, laziness to other nations. I have other things to do later, Abu-chan." Naruto then turned around and began to run through the trees, quickly escaping the grasp of Tsunade and being forced to do her work. Honestly, he was a Kage. There was no way in hell he was going to do any more work than he had to. It was a rule among Kages, after all. The people of Konoha gathered together, all having their focus on one person. The sixth Hokage was apparently telling them what everyone was going to be doing from now on. Sure, the nin from the village had a vaguer idea of what they were going to do, but not the refugees. The Hokage walked towards the front of the group, having a few roots come up from the ground so that she could stand on them. Stepping up on it, she coughed and looked over the entire group of civilians. "People of Konoha," she started, "I'll be blunt with you on our situation. In the past few weeks, our village has been destroyed, many of our people killed, and being forced to travel away from our home in order to prevent as many more deaths as possible. I tell you now that this is even worse than the secret world wars that we had gone through. It is up to us, the remaining citizens, to survive out in this world for not only ourselves, but for our loved ones that were killed in the six-way war that happened. I don't know what will happen in the future, and I can't change any of the past, but what I do know is that we will need to work together in order to make it through this." The people all started to look at one another, wondering on how they would be able to help. Tsunade sighed in relief when she saw how cooperative they were. Thank God Naruto left cue cards with Shizune. I know that right now, you are wondering how people with no fighting skills, little to no training on how to survive in the wild could possibly be able to help right now. While the nins are busy working from our home, we will need you, the citizens, to be busy working on the homes. The next few weeks will be nothing but hard work as we build our own homes, but in the end, it's all we can do for now. Also, please don't try to make it over flashy. 5 simple small houses are better than 1 over detailed house. Tsunade then stepped off the route, walking towards the tent that was sent up for her. The people began to talk with one another, a few of them running from the group with tools and beginning to saw some of the trees in the canyon. The other people in the village looked at one another before some more of them went to the wagons to try and get tools to begin building. When they all tried to cut the trees down, the shinobi quickly stopped them, telling them that Naruto ordered that the forest not be cut down for wood. They stated that Naruto would supply the building wood for them. The people that didn't make idiots prepared to actually do something useful, some searching the area, some cooking a large amount of food for everyone. Even if they didn't have the right idea on what to do, at least they had the heart to do it. Congratulations on your great speech. Naruto began to clap, him standing near the back of the tent. Why the back? Because it gave him a few seconds to escape in case Tsunade blew a fuse and he needed to run for it. Tsunade glared at Naruto, her expression dropping slightly a few moments later. "You know, you really are an asshole at times. I try my best, Aba-chan, I try my best," Naruto stated, Tsunade just moving over towards one of 2 chairs that were in the tent and working on the files that were lying on the desk next to said chairs. "Besides, it made good practice for you. Now that you've replaced." Naruto went silent, Tsunade having already turned around in her chair and apparently reading the files. Naruto closed his eyes while sighing. "Sorry for bringing it up." Naruto opened his eyes once more, looking over towards the group of Konoha citizens that had been gathered in one spot so that they'd be easier to handle. "Anyway, we do have an issue on our hands." Tsunade turned towards Naruto, her eyebrow raised slightly. "And that is, as much as I hate to bring up the subject again, with the death of Jiraiya, we're down on Sennin. This leave only us 2, the legendary Sakura and the legendary anyway. We're still lacking a little power," Naruto stated, Tsunade smiling a little. 1. What's your legendary name? 2. Sakura officially became a Sennin about 1 or 2 months ago, Tsunade stated, Naruto shaking his head. Sakura may officially be considered a Sennin, but she's still inexperienced, so it's better not to rely on her for cage-ranked battles, Naruto replied. "As for my legendary name, let's just forget about it for now," Naruto said, giving a sheepish smile and moving a little close towards his apparent exit. "So, how do you plan to come up with more Sennins then, Naruto?" Tsunade asked, moving a little closer to him. Hey, she had never heard about his status as a legendary. Orochimaru was the legendary traitor, Jiraiya's being the legendary pervert, and Tsunade's being the legendary sucker. Their master, the third Hokage's, was the legendary genius being trained by the first and second Hokage's. He was the first Sennin, so it would be interesting to hear what Naruto's legendary status was. Well, for one thing, you'd need to have more strict training routines, considering that all the academy students needed to pass the test was to know 3 very simple jutsus and be able to throw a kunai in a straight line, Naruto stated. I was thinking having them learn about 10 jutsus, needing to have proficiently in a few weapons besides the basics, and more physical training. It wouldn't be much, but better than what we have right now. Naruto moved a little closer towards his exit, preparing to leave. Tsunade quickly lashed out, grabbing Naruto and bringing him into a headlock. That's a wonderful idea, Naruto, I'll think about it. For now, Tell me your legendary name. Tsunade pumped some chakra into her arms. Considering how strong Naruto was, it wouldn't be much, but enough to stop him from breaking free so easily, that is. Naruto continued to struggle for a few minutes, stopping and letting his arms drop. "You're not going to let go until I tell you, huh?" Naruto asked, Tsunade grinning at the question. "Nope, we can take all day if we have to." Naruto, giving in to his grandmother's unhumanly strength, decided to give her the answer she was looking for and just end this already. "Fine, if you want to hear it so badly, I'll tell you. My legendary name is..." Sakura walked through the forest of the canyon they had arrived in. She had been busy checking the supplies to watch her master's speech, so she wanted to see if she was alright. She knew about Tsunade's inability to really make any long speeches, or short ones for that matter. Ordering someone is one thing, trying to announce things to people and give them hope was another. She could only imagine what her master was feeling right now. If only Hinata-chan wasn't so damn busy, Sakura stated, thinking about it. Yeah, it was actually because Hinata offered to take over for her that she was able to go see Tsunade. It was a return the favor sort of thing, so Sakura didn't feel all that bad about it. At least she planned on going back and telling Hinata so that she wouldn't have to go herself, considering she was probably going to be tired after doing so much work. In case you're wondering, yes, Tsunade liked to work her subordinates to the ground, which could be relaxing depending on said job. Sakura jumped into the trees, not wanting to go through a group of citizens to reach the tent. Apparently, Naruto had just given out an order for them to spread, which was a go thing, considering that they were easy targets while bundled up together. They had the room, considering the canyon's size, for everyone to get a good portion of the canyon to themselves and not feel cramped. Honestly, she really had to thank Naruto for bringing them here. Traveling through the trees, Sakura passed by another group of people. Seeing a group of tents come into view, she jumped and landed on the ground, making her way over towards her master's tent. Sakura knew that Tsunade was going to be busy for the rest of the day, but she could take a few minutes off before worrying about everyone else. Of course, Sakura didn't really know which tent was the Hokage's, so it became a problem. It took a few times people before someone looked up from their work and pointed her in the direction of the tent. The area was extremely busy at the moment, getting everything prepared as a command center for the entire village. They were going to be doing this for the next few days, so it'd be best to avoid this area. Yeah, a nice habit she picked up from Tsunade was being lazy slightly, not enough to get out of work she was given, but enough not to go looking for it. Making her way over towards the tent, a look of confusion appeared on her face. Her master, the 6th Hokage, was currently on the ground, laughing her ass off. She rolled around, holding her sides as she continued to cry tears of laughter. Standing next to her was Naruto, whose head had dropped, along with his arms. Apparently, something had just happened between the two. Tsunade taking time to reflect on it. Sakura, knowing that it probably involved Naruto by the way he was standing, wished she was there when Tsunade found out about it. She could use a good laugh as well, since they may be rare from now on. Shaking her head, Sakura turned around and made her way back to her own area to complete her job and save Hinata from it. She was happy to see her master smile like that, even after everything that had happened. With the loss of Jiraiya, the destruction of Konoha, and the amount of paperwork that was about to be placed on her lap, she only hoped that Tsunade would get a break sometime in the future. If there was a future for them, anyway. Author: well, that's just about it. Now I just have to go work on the new chapter and on other stories as well. Size. Please read and review of The Hidden Waterfall. Author: welp, here's the next chapter. I've been trying to play the game Rogue Galaxy for some time. It's a simple but addictive game. Beware. Vid. All of those are wrong and nope, not yet. Going to make you people think about it first, well, even more than you have now. ANIDRAGON77. About those two, have faith. I'm already setting something up I think really won't know until it happens, though I have an idea of what I want to happen in the chapters. With a few things I just wing it, like with Gara's teddy bear XD. Rozzy the player. I fear no man. Pink ponies maybe, but no man. You're going to have to wait along with everybody else. XP. THEDISTURBEDONE 666,666. 1. Why, Naruto's legendary name, of course, of which you will not find out until later in the story. 2. Well, with his power, you'd only assume that it would be natural, that and the fact of what would you be thinking about at the moment, how person became Kage, or how to survive an invasion of large mechanical spiders that fall from the sky. As far as they're concerned, as long as Naruto helps them, they don't care either way. 3. Well, I see the Makuden Jutsu as a blood limit, and since Tsunade is the first's granddaughter and since Naruto is Tsunade's grandson, you see where this has ended. Not just Naruto, anyone within his family that blood related to him is able to use it. This includes the fourth Hokage, Iruka, who has used it in the last story, Shizune, and Tsunade herself. For all wondering about why I explained this, shrugs, this isn't much of a spoiler, so it's fine if you know by now. Hasabusa, maybe, if I feel like it, one of the few things that I win, you know? Disclaimer, I do not own anything. Damn, enjoy the story of the hidden waterfall. Naruto rushed through the trees, making haste towards his objective. He had found a small mechanical bug on himself a while ago and mentally took note that he was taking too much time to get everything ready. They were already starting to gather more information on the shinobi nations and probably drawing up a plan to counter them. He would need to get as many nations' villages as possible to join before they struck. At least that way he would maybe able to resist them and buy some time. Everything was riding on whether or not he could gather enough villages to join them. Looking back, he once again saw that the ones following him were having difficulty keeping up. He wished that he could have just gone on ahead without them, but apparently he needed to be protected because he was a cage and extremely valuable. As you can see, their logic fails entirely. Then again, he might need them if they strike a little earlier than he anticipated. How little helpful they could possibly be. Are you guys doing alright? Naruto called back to them, decreasing his speed a bit. Me and Dosu are fine, Naruto-sensei. I really don't know about Chabu though, Kin stated, looking over at said person. He was, like he always was, listening to music, his hands in his pockets as he jumped through the trees. Unlike Kin or Dosu, he really didn't seem to have much trouble keeping up with him, though the larger one following after them was a different story. You doing alright, Choji? Naruto asked, seeing him struggling to keep up with them. He was a powerhouse fighter, that Naruto acknowledged, but when it came to speed, Choji was lacking. At least he had the stamina to keep up somewhat. Thinking of something, Naruto grinned and looked over at Kin. Hey Kin-chan, do you mind looking after Choji and making sure he doesn't collapse on us? Naruto asked, Kin looking at him with an expressed blank expression. Why me? Well, because out of your entire team, you're the one I trust to be responsible enough to take care of him, Naruto stated, receiving a glare from Dosu and, well, not really anything from Chabu. He was still in his own little world at the moment. Without another word, Ken jumped backwards, landing a little behind Choji, increasing her speed to catch up to him and decreasing it to match his when she caught up to him. Choji just wondered why he had to be taken care of like a child. He was fully capable of keeping up with them for another 10 or so minutes anyway. Choji looked over at Ken, smiling at her and giving her a thumbs up to let her know that he was fine. Ken just ignored it, much to his confusion. Dosu and Chabu stayed out of it, and Naruto plotted on ways to turn this into something amusing for him. He deserved a little entertainment every once in a while, even if it was at the expense of others. Naruto continued to plot all the way to their location, which was a giant waterfall. Dosu asked, looking upwards to see its top. He was then blinded by the sun and covered his eyes quickly, looking over at Naruto, who had his eyes closed altogether. You sure there's a village here? Positive, Naruto replied, looking over at his student. You have to think, with all the ways to hide a village nowadays, is it really impossible? You could take Sound Village for an example, Naruto stated, Dosu nodding his head in agreement and looking back over at the waterfall. It really was a sight once you took the time to notice everything about it. Unlike the Sound Village, Dosu might have really wanted to live here with how small and peaceful it seemed. Then again, he'd be bored to tears, and the author would have to make some sarcastic remark about how he would hate it. Life's a bitch at those times, really. Looking behind him, Dosu saw that Chabu, as usual, was just enjoying his music while having his eyes closed. He really needed to be more aware of the environment around him, being such an easy target right now. Choji was on the ground, gasping a bit and catching his breath. Kin was standing right beside the guy, slightly bending forward to see if the guy was alright. All in all, nothing interesting, but you know, Naruto started, Dosu turning to face him once more. They're not just going to let us come in. I thought you knew these people? Yeah, well, you guys don't, so they're going to be a little cautious, Naruto stated, thinking about it. Well, this village had every right to be cautious, to be honest. I mean, they're such a small village that they could get wiped out by a few Anbu squads from Konoha, they don't have that much war experience and few veterans, so they had to stay in hiding or else risk being destroyed by some nation that got all high and mighty, wanting to prove something to the other nations that are just wanting to conquer the smaller villages before heading to the larger ones. You can never have too many treaties when it comes to this kind of thing. Well, you could if you had to send help out to every one of them at the same time. Then things would get complicated and out of hand. Getting back on tack, Naruto looked towards the others. Be ready for anything, you never know what they might do to test to see if we can enter the village or not, Naruto stated, Choji and Kin looking at him in confusion. But don't you? As I just stated, they do know me, but Tihei don't know you. Besides, I think their radar is on the fritz right now, so they may not come at all, Naruto stated, tilting his head to glance at the sky. We could be waiting for quite some time till then. That would be because they like to strike when their guests have their guard down, Naruto stated, going over towards the nearest tree and sitting down, leaning back against it. Might as well enjoy the time until then. With that, Naruto pulled out a green book and began to read it. Dosu blinked, then looked over at Choji and Kin, who just shrugged. Chabu, who had lifted his earphones at the time, smiled when he heard something about relaxing and went to another tree. Lying down next to the tree, he seemed like he was sleeping already, his head still nodding a bit to the music. Dosu just stood there, wondering on what he was going to do. Sighing, he just sat down on the very spot he was and began to tune his suit. The damn thing was going a little haywire after that run, and he needed it to be in top order. Ken and Choji also wondered on what they could do before a later person got up and started to walk towards the pond pool lake, couldn't decide on what to call it, underneath the waterfall. What are you doing? Ken asked, Choji looking back over towards her. It's so hot in the day, I'm going to take a dive. Choji knew that Ken was apparently satisfied with the answer, ignored her blushing and moved on towards his goal. The crisp cold water that was before him. So many things he could do with it. Now that he thought about it, he could wash the sweat stench off of his top armor. He would do the bottom part, but he was in the presence of a lady, however unladylike she may act. Reaching the water, Choji sighed in relief and begun to take his top armor off. After a few minutes, he managed to get it off and dipped it into the water. He heard someone gasp and looked to see Ken's mouth dragging to the floor. Choji's confusion grew by the second. What? Your Ken's eyes continued to scan up and down Choji's, well actually his muscles. Only one thing could really describe that, just damn. His upper body was ripped with a lot of muscle, his arm probably being about the size of Ken's head. His lower body looked round with the armor on, but it looked like it was made out of muscle than anything else. His back was just completely muscle, all of this making Ken wonder if he was just as muscular in the lower regions, shaking her head to be rid of the thoughts that would have her screaming in pleasure and or pain. Take a guess as to the pain part. Ken really had to wonder something. If you're that muscular, then why the hell do you lose so much stamina so fast? Ken asked, Choji blinking at the question. It's not really about stamina, it's more of the fact that it takes twice as much energy for me to jump through the trees than it does to run on the ground. I actually would have been better off just running towards the location anyway, Choji stated, looking down at his large gut. Though, I wouldn't trade this for an abs in the world. Is that so? Yeah, it's great being considered fat. You have no fangirls fighting over you, can eat as much as you want, and best of all, I'm required to be fat in order to do my family jutsus. I love the simple life, everything about me being big, Choji said, seeing Ken look at him with an interesting expression. Ken-san? So everything about you is big, huh? Ken said, slowly looking downwards. Choji blinked, looking down as well to see what she was looking at. Finding it to be what made him a man, he quickly closed his legs and turned around. No, that's not what I meant. So it's small then? No, it's not, it's just. Choji's face was turning red as he grabbed his armor and sat down in the pond. Yeah, he planned to do it while standing up, but after that, he was a little insecure about it. Starting to clean his armor, Choji looked back slowly towards Ken. Yeah, she was grinning evilly. Choji began to sweat, cleaning his armor a little faster with a washcloth and turning around to face his work. So Ken-san, don't you have something you need to do before the shinobi arrive? Choji asked, not looking back at her. He was scared at this point, wondering if this was going to turn into a fangirl moment. He didn't have any fangirls, but he knew people that did. They had been preparing him for some time to be able to escape from situations like these for a while now, saying that he would get some eventually even if he didn't want any. Especially when they saw that his fat was actually a shitload of muscle. Then, he would be royally screwed, literally or non-laterally depending on said fangirl. Well, I do have one thing to do, Kin replied, Choji feeling her move into the water and walk towards her. It would only be a matter of time until it happened, his heart racing, his breathing increasing. He didn't want to die off the fangirl rape, one of the things Shinobi considered the worst thing to die by besides torture and fangirl screaming. Praying to God was all he could do at this moment as she approached him. If only anything could save him from his fate. Choji felt his armor being pulled out of his hands, raising his arms up to defend himself from the onslaught, closing his eyes. Waiting for a few moments, he wondered why he had not been attacked yet. Opening his eyes, Choji looked up at Kin to see her looking down at him with a raised eyebrow. What are you doing? Saving myself from certain destruction, Choji stated, Kin shaking her head and sitting down next to him. She began to wash the armor in the water. What are you doing? I'm showing you how to properly wash it, you're doing it all wrong, Kin replied as she continued to wash the armor. Just watch it and be glad that I'm doing this, she said, continuing to wash the armor. Choji blinked, seeing her wash the armor in almost the exact opposite way that he was doing it. He really was hopeless at some points. Something came to Choji's mind. Kin-san, what about your pants? What about them? They're going to be soaking wet. He was telling the truth since she was sitting in water. Kin thought about it for a moment, letting a grin slowly form on her face. Well then, after this, I'll just have to take them off to let them dry. Be patient, you'll get to see what's underneath soon enough. Choji's face went beet red at the images that were filling his head, Kin just smiling amusingly to herself. Would she really do it? Who knows? Probably depended on how he behaved for the remainder of the washing. He showed her the ripped muscles that he had, why not show him something in return? This was going to be a fun idea to toy with in her mind, the twisted one, mind you. I wonder what's taking them so long, Naruto asked, looking up from his book and towards the sky. They should have attacked by now, what could be taking them? Maybe they were waiting for him to fall asleep? Nah, that wouldn't happen for a while. Even then, he'd still wake up in time to kick their asses and be done with it. Naruto glanced around the area at the others. Dosu seemed to be having a fun time working on his suit. That thing was his pride and joy, really. It's too bad that he only invented things for fighting. He really could go the distance in the world when it came to productivity. Naruto would need to try and have a talk with him about it later. Chabu seemed to be asleep, laying on the ground and still listening to his music. Naruto didn't really know what was up with Chabu. He was just kinda there. Hell, the guy seemed to be able to keep up with him when they were coming here. Naruto took note to observe him in the future. Then there was the unofficial couple of Kin and Choji. They really were good together. Both of them junk food crazed and carrying around 70 pounds of food on them at all times. Though, how Kin was able to hide that food was still a mystery to him. Probably some scrolls that she had with her. Then again, she believed that scrolls destroyed the flavor of the food, so he doubted that she would really use them. Naruto was really interested how far their flirting would take them, but now he couldn't. Naruto stretched, standing up and putting his book away. He gave them 30 or so seconds until they arrived. Naruto looked over to the side, seeing Chabu standing on his own feet, a serious face having dawned his face. At least they wouldn't ambush everyone. Besides him, they both looked towards the forest, Naruto cracking his neck, while Chabu just took his hands out for his pockets. Naruto let a grin slide over his face, getting into a stance to fight the oncoming shinobi. Took you guys long enough. Author, well, that's it for now. Hope I did a good enough job with Choji, and Kin laughs nervously. Kinda been on the fritz with my writing lately, go figure. Please read and review. Not sure if Choji should speak to Kin with the san or chan suffix. A song with a dud? Author, well, I'm in a good mood today. I just finished the game Rogue Galaxy and I got to watch it snow while updating off the simple things in life. Also, I have to say, last chapter wasn't supposed to be a voting chapter. XD still got votes. Meh. Still going to go through with it, I guess. Girl of Light Writer. Yeah, it's like a balance that I need to find in the stories. If it has a chapter or 3 being too serious, my mind just kinda shifts over to writing, thinking humor-wise. I still continue the plot, but in a more comical way. Rosie the player. I plead the 6th, her large chest shall protect me. Meh, you never know, the pink ponies may or may not have an effect on me, depends on my mood. ANIDRAGON77. Indeed, I love writing scenes for other characters. It allows me to show that this story does not just revolve around Naruto and Hinata, that it's beyond that to all the characters I have written about. You never know who will pop up next, adds another thing to look forward to in the story. All wrong. I would never use any names that are taken kitsune period. Why? Because it's so abused as a word. You watch too much Stargate, and yes, that would apply to Choji. He's fat in a very good way. Hasabusa, indeed, he'll probably be saying her name with the sen suffix from now on. Thedisturbe 666,666. Yeah, where's all the Choji fans? Holds up a finger saying Choji's number 1, thinks about it, then scribbles out 1 putting 19 well, on my all-time favorites anyway. Nope, Chabu's not a mythical period XP well. Unless I get bored you never know with Chabu. Matt Kun looks at review brain fries painfully. Seriously though, even if I only bothered to skim over it, thank you for that little tidbit. Though, it's probably not going to change the story in any form or manner. You're a little late with it for me to just change everything XD. Though, still, thanks. Miscellaneous soldier. Nah, San will do. I too loved the scene. Why I love the scene is already stated above, and I don't feel like typing it out again. I may shorten you name yours is one of the ones that I need to look back 2/3 times just to get. Heian, legendary, I doubt it, it may be known a little bit around the Naruto section of, but is still nothing big. I kill off characters for the story if I just feel like it, I can spare a few every now and then. You'll get used to it eventually. Of course Gaara's like that, he's Gaara with a teddy bear that has a pirate eye patch XD. And I'm just picking a few to comment on. Glad you're enjoying the story so much. To all who's wondering, this may seem a little out of place, a bit of beat. The fighting sucking, I was half asleep when I wrote most of this chapter, go figure. Disclaimer, I do not own Naruto. Were you expecting some witty comment? As if, though I do like how the lines turned out. Enjoy the fic. A song with a dud? Naruto and Chabu stared at the group of nin approaching them, each one pulling out a various weapon and taking a stance. Naruto looked over at Chabu, said person's eyes having closed quite a while ago. Naruto wondered what Chabu was doing, but let it go. He would need to deal with the nin. How weak they may have seemed before having a word with Chabu. Then again, if Chabu was skilled enough, then maybe they could talk about it during the fight slaughter. It's always nice to have a conversation while mindlessly killing your enemy. So how many do you want? 4, 5, all of them. Naruto dropped the stance he had taken up, looking over at Chabu with a blank expression. You sure you can handle them all? Naruto asked, the nin bending down slightly and rushing forward towards them. Chabu reached to get his CD player, flipping through the songs until he found one, stepping forward towards the nin. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. Alright. Just try not to kill them, Naruto replied, Chabu nodding slightly and looking towards the nin. Opening his eyes, they once again had 3 grayish rings in them, pumping violently to the music. Bringing his hands forward, 8 small objects began to glow around him. Bringing his hands back, Chabu ran forward towards the nin. I thought it were a much further place, it's an unreachable, empty dream. Wait, hey, wait, is that you, Dad? 2 of the objects shot forward, splitting into several pieces and shooting forwards through the nin. They froze in place, even the ones in mid-jump. The second one coming up and releasing a wave of energy towards the nin, causing them to scream out in pain and fall towards the ground. Chabu ran in, bending down slightly to touch the ground with his hands and bring them upwards, causing a shockwave to pass through the ground, killing some of the nin. The paralyzation apparently was already wearing off, a few of the nins already beginning to move. Chabu managed to kill a few of the others before they managed to replace themselves with a few logs to dodge the shockwaves. Even any small light goes unseen. For me to be even just a little closer to you. This life, even if I lose it, I will still protect you. 2 other objects moved towards Chabu, said person fending off the nin, using the shockwaves and staff-like object that had appeared suddenly in his hands. He pushed off one of the nin, twisting around and bringing his staff sideways into the nin, up and then down to the ground. His hand pointed towards the nin, a shockwave crushing and apparently killing the nin. Placing his foot underneath the body, he kicked it upwards, then towards a few nin heading towards them. They sliced the nin in half without a single thought. Looking back, he saw that only one of the objects were left, it taking the shape of an arrow and heading straight for him. His body absorbed the arrow. Chabu continuing to fight like nothing ever happened. The courage, deep in my heart, tears in the darkness, they surf the doubt, these white wings. Geez, I don't think I can do anything. Little purplish lights flashed around Chabu, being protected from several attacks jutsus being sent by the nin. He focused mainly on just killing them as soon as possible. He needed to finish them or risk the others facing the danger. Sure, there was Naruto to help, but nothing was absolutely guaranteed with this fight. Bringing one of his hand towards him, a white light began to glow from it, Pointing towards the trees, Chabu shot what looked like a large bird towards a group of nin that were running towards him. It wiped them and the top of the trees out in one shot. Looking over at where the other object should have been, it just floated there, not doing a single thing to help. You know, Chabu really hated duds. Should you stop in your tracks? I look now at this smiling face and let my heart take it in. I don't want to always be protected. I wanted to protect too. Chabu finished the last of the nin, striking them down with a blow from his staff. He stopped and took a look around the area, taking notice of something very important. One of the objects turned into an arrow once more, shooting forth into Chabu and being absorbed by him. The other one froze, not moving once, and considering it was in the middle of the air, that is very odd. Chabu shrugged it off and jumped into the trees, heading in the direction that the nin had come from. They're puppets, every last one of them. This means that the puppet master must be close by. Evermore, sparkling now, getting strong, we'll all have touched hearts. If we all improve, the world will change dramatically. Chabu increased his speed, feeling a sudden burst of energy run through him. Jumping from tree to tree, his staff had begun to glow and was now taking out nins with a single swing. Whether or not they had their guard up, jumping off one of the higher branches, he brought the staff down and sent a massive shockwave through the ground, taking out most of the remaining nin and several trees in the area. Looking onwards, he finally had found the one responsible for all of this. Sparkling now, our souls we hold up high. Work until your limit to aim for 1000%. The man blinked, seeing Chabu disappear from his sight. Feeling something being pressed against his back, he sighed and lifted his hands up slowly. Chabu stood behind him, his staff gone and now replaced with a kunai, his eyes now closed. Naruto raised his eyebrow at Chabu when he closed his eyes, wondering if it had anything to do with his blood limit. At least, what Naruto thought was a blood limit. Stepping out from behind the trees, Naruto yawned as he walked over to Chabu. Your footwork was horrible, you style act. You weren't able to keep focus on the battle at few points, and all in general you were sloppy. Have anything to say for yourself? Naruto asked, Chabu turning his head towards him. The song was sloppy, Chabu replied, looking back down at the man who had been controlling the puppets earlier. So, what do we do with him? Well, to begin with, you can put your kunai back, but relax if he does anything. Naruto began to smile in one of those cross me and die sort of ways. I'll kill him on the spot, he said, now giving a cheery smile at the man. The man himself could only sweat drop at this. The village hero was right, you are insane. All the more to find ways to kill you with, Naruto stated, looking towards the waterfall. I suppose you're the one that's going to lead us into the village, correct? He asked, the man nodding his head. Yes, the village hero wanted to confirm if it was you or not. The man said, looking over his shoulder at Chabu. May I stand now? Chabu looked over at Naruto, who simply nodded in confirmation to let him go. Pulling his hand back, he placed the kunai into its holder and watched the man get up, dusting himself off. The man looked towards Naruto, seeing him take a dramatic bow towards him. After you. Yeah, thanks. The man walked past him, heading straight for the waterfall. Dosu looked up from his work, a few speakers that he had detached from his suit lying around on the ground. Wondering who the man was, he would have prepared for a fight, but seeing Chabu and Naruto walk behind the man calmed him a bit. Looking back at his speakers, he started to put his tools away and start reattaching his speakers to his suit. Even if Chabu and Naruto were walking behind the man, better to be safe than sorry. After reattaching the speakers, he got up off the ground and headed towards them. They had apparently stopped in front of the pond to stare at something. Naruto laughing his ass off. Don't worry, Kin, now I can prove to your mother that you are interested in men. Naruto stated. Kin's face beat red. Choji also had a red face, his eyes towards the ground. He really didn't want to make eye contact with anyone right now. Dosu, completely oblivious to what had been happening in the past, wondered what had happened. Shrugging, he decided that now wasn't the time to try and talk about it. Anyway, he could just bug Choji about it later, since there was no way in hell that he was going to ask Ken about what happened. She'd castrate him on the spot. Who is this? Dosu asked, the group turning their attention towards him. He's the representative of Waterfall village. He's going to lead us to the entrance of the village and take us to see the hero of the village. Naruto explained, looking over at the man. Right? Naruto's grin was almost frightening to Dosu, even if he was already used to seeing it. The man flinched, slowly nodding his head in confirmation. I already told you I was going to lead you to the village and take you to see the leader," the man stated, Naruto smiling cheerfully at him. "Well, then we'll have no problems." Naruto looked over the group with the same cheerful smile. "Everyone ready?" "Yeah, whenever you are," Kin said, standing up and leaving the water. Choji also stood up, leaving the water as well, and also stating that he was ready to go. He was carrying his armor underneath one of his arms. Chabu just nodded his head to whatever they were saying. He wanted to listen to some good music after that crappy song he used in the fight. Naruto looked over at Dosu, who shrugged once more. "Yeah, I'm good to go." With that, Naruto turned towards the man, who immediately began to walk towards the village entrance, the others following behind him. Whatever this village was, or what it contained, Naruto seemed to be pretty excited over it. Who knows, Dosu may be able to find someone that shares his love of inventing as much as he does. Besides Naruto anyway. Damn it, doesn't this pile ever shrink? The sixth Hokage growled at her daughter, who was bringing in yet another stack of papers, said person backing up a bit in fear. Even with the village destroyed, she still had to do this paperwork. Why the hell would these people, who have everything they need to survive, still be sending requests? She even had some requests for a mission from some of the refugees. Tsunade, no matter how much she had been through up to this point, could not imagine the pain that cages go through when doing paperwork. How Naruto managed to make it through doing paperwork and keep his sanity, she'll never know. "So, mother, have you talked to Naruto on who they are yet?" Shizune asked, backing away slowly from Tsunade, who seemed ready to blow at any moment. Tsunade continued to growl, Shizune slowly backing out of the tent in fear of her mother going berserk. "I'll just leave these outside the tent for you to do when you're finished with the other paperwork." She then left the tent, keeping an eye on her mother until she was safely outside and laid the paperwork on the ground, running off to get as far away from that area as possible. Tsunade, now satisfied with what had happened, looked down at the remaining paperwork. At least another 15 to 20 stacks left on the ground. 3-4 on her desk. Yeah, the worst part is that the wind blew every so often, so the paperwork would get messed up, making it to where she would need to clean up the paperwork every few hours, spending what time she could spare signing through the paperwork before the wind got a chance to blow again. Tsunade defiantly needed a break that she was going to have right now. Getting up from her chair, Tsunade stretched and made her way outside of the tent. The warmth of the sun felt good, having spent the last 4 days inside the tent. Yeah, she had been doing late-night signing and hadn't left the tent once. Shizune was good enough to bring Tsunade some food to keep her going, which she really appreciated, mind you. She just didn't want to do any more paperwork at the moment. You had to give her a break with that, at least. Or not. Though, I need to consider what she mentioned, Tsunade stated out loud to herself, passing by shinobi who had been assigned different jobs to help keep the place going. The citizens were busy building several residences for themselves, Naruto providing a steady amount of wood for them to use. Surprisingly, it was a group of moles that was giving them wood due to Naruto's orders. They were apparently metallic life forms like the jackals that were instructed by Naruto to go out to other nations and take a small amount of trees from their forests. The nations that they did take being from Cloud and whatever was left of the forests next to the ruins of the Leaf Village. Naruto had wanted to provide them with the wood while he took care of getting the villages together. Back to the subject at hand, Naruto had yet to tell Tsunade who they were. She had been waiting patiently for the answer, figuring that he would bring it up eventually, but now they were apparently running short on time. She had even sent Hinata in Naruto's stead to the village hidden in the grass. They might as well get as many of the smaller villages as they could in the shortest amount of time before heading on to the main ones, or villages that would be considered main ones. Tsunade walked until she was able to find a place that was far away from the hammering of the citizens and the sounds of various people as they continued to work on the new village. She wanted some alone time to think about things or do something else that didn't involve paperwork. Reaching the beginning of the canyon, she walked up the path and out of the canyon, this itself taking around 30 or so minutes by just walking. Shizune had probably come to see if she was still working on paperwork by now and was currently freaking out when she didn't see her mother there. Reaching the top, she looked around the area and headed towards the nearest tree. Sitting down next to it, she leaned back against the tree, shifting body into a more comfortable position. The sun just felt so good right now, so perfect for a nap. Closing her eyes, the sixth drifted off into sleep, a peaceful smile appearing on her face. At least for right now, she'd be able to relax. Author: a pack of blood from cute little pink ponies, or cookies, your choice, to anyone who can guess what song was played and which anime it came from. It's from one of my favorite animes. The person who designed it is a genius in my book. Another village, another point of view. Author: Welp, I don't really have anything to report. Wait, I'm updating the other 2 Naruto stories I have up here for all those that are interested. Have fun with those. That may have been true if you hadn't gotten it all wrong. Shizune is her blood child. Kakashi was the one that was adopted. The first 8 chapters of the last story pointed that out. For future reference, I will state which ones were blood child and which ones weren't. The 4th Hokage, Shizune and Iruka, were all Tsunade's and Jiraiya's blood children, Kakashi being adopted a little later. That help? I don't really blame you for the mix-up. It's kinda been a while since it was pointed out. General Misk, also known as Miscellaneous Soldier, doing well is the whole point. XD, hope you enjoy this chapter. Boom for Riot Tail. Head implodes at the thought of that pairing. Glad you enjoyed the pairing. Expect to have quite a few pairings that stand out among the rest. Like Shikamaru and Static is heard in the background. That's going to be fun to type. Anidragon77. Jiraiya was the 5th Hokage as stated throughout most of the last story, along with Shizune being Tsunade's daughter, which was stated within the first 8 chapters. Yeah, I think you missed something. Though I don't blame you. XD, it's kinda been a little long since you had to worry about it. That and the Giantis mechanical robots kinda distracting everyone. Gunslaver, claps. Congratulations. Not only did you guess the song from last chapter, but you also guessed the inspiration for Ruby. Yes, she was passed off Raider from Fate Stray Nights. Figured I could go beyond the crossovers that usually happen in the Naruto world. For example, Bleach, Inuyasha, Yu Yu Hakusho, or however the hell you spell it. Harry Potter shudders at the thought, though I still don't know how that one would work. As for Irvine's inspiration, no, he was not based off Berserker. No, the Hercules thing was decided from the simple fact that Hercules was the only person that was strong enough when you took out the Olympus, or however you spell it, gods, the monsters, and the titans. So yeah. Besides, if Irvine was based off Berserker, then how would that explain his brother Zack? As for the Genins, give it time. I can't exactly throw all 30-something characters that are in this story into the same damn chapter at once. You're only allowed to state something like that after the story is finished. Matt Kun, it's all good, but you should know ahead of time I'm more than just a otaku, my friend. No, I actually spent most of my childhood in Japan till my father retired from active duty and moved back to the States. To me, Anine just reminds me a bit of what my old home was like. And about the awesome parks they had over there. XD, damn, I miss those large parks. If you never check alerts, then just attach it to favorites. All you have to do is get off your lazy ass and do it. XD. Hasabusa, what can I say? I wanted to sue the song from one of my favorite animes. The man who made it was truly a genius, and to think he didn't just show up one day with it. No, he went through quite a bit of manga idea before finally being able to come up with one that worked. Tis is one of the few people I respect. That and the person who first created anime in general. Most people don't even think about him. THEDISTURBEDONE 666,666. Alas, it seems I'm becoming too predictable in a way that is true and in a way that is false. Which one is false and which one is true I will leave to you. Basically, I'm not giving any real information on it. You'll just have to read for yourself. Major Hinata fan, tis been a while since you last reviewed, and, well, even with being so long you managed to remember that Jiraiya was the 5th. Whistles loudly. He nice to see that you're still breathing. Razi the player, no one is sane in this world, so no, you're not insane. You're just like everybody else. That, and thinking is overrated like pants. Hands him the package. Be careful, it breaks easily. Disclaimer, I do not own Naruto or anything else for that matter unless I divided by 0 and created a black hole that would engulf the world itself that would show them. Wait, what was that? Enjoy the fic. Another village, another point of view. Alright, is everyone accounted for? Hinata called out as she made her way through the giant grass and into an seemingly open area. It was tall enough to come up to her shoulders, making it hard to travel. She would have jumped through the trees, but they hadn't seen a forest for half an hour. It was just one giant grassy plain, all of which made sense since they were looking for the village hidden in the grass after all. Looking back, she wondered if some of them had wandered a little too far away from the others. Yo, Hinata heard someone call out, turning around to see Kakashi with his book out. Hinata wondered why he would choose a time like this to read his book, of all places. The second thing she wondered was how he was able to travel through the grass. Taking note that he was indeed alive, she looked out for the others. If you're wondering, everyone except Shino should be fine. Why? Hinata asked, once again giving her attention back to the older nin. Well, it turns out that this area is a breeding grounds for his bugs, and they are apparently taking up the opportunity as it's given. Kakashi stated, turning the page in his book. Basically, they're screwing each other in his body and causing him to act a little abnormal. A shadow flew by them, a scream following it. Hinata raised an eyebrow at Kakashi. We theorize that after a certain amount of time, he will slowly revert back to his regular behavior pattern. Though we have yet to take into consideration of his amount of bugs, the things he had consumed beforehand, the hormones of said bugs. Basically saying, you guys have no clue when he's going to be normal again, right? Pretty much, Kakashi replied, looking over towards the side. Looks like you finally made it, Shizune. Shizune sighed as she walked towards them, not having the best of times from what they could tell. Why the hell did I wear high heels again? Shizune asked, looking down at her now ruined shoes. Of all the times she had to choose to wear high heels, it had to be today. She thought that getting to the village wouldn't be so difficult, and now, she was paying the price. Hinata could only look at the jounin in pity. This was one of my good pairs too. It's a long shot, but when we left Konoha, was one of those large suitcases you packed full of your shoe collection? Don't start, Kakashi. Said person only changed the page, seemingly paying more attention to it than the two women before him. Hinata looked at the two, wondering when they were ever going to grow up. Hinata noticed that they were missing someone. Where's Sakura-chan? Present. It took her some effort, but she was able to crawl her way out of the grass and make it into the area. She gasped a bit, some sweat coming down her forehead. That had to be the most annoying environmental obstacle I have ever witnessed. I hate how tall the grass is. Everyone stared at her, blinking. Wanting to change the subject, Sakura looked over at Kakashi. So, when are the people from grass going to arrive? Sakura asked, Kakashi snapping to and thinking about it himself. It depends on how long it takes until they know we're in the area. Smaller villages have a tendency to actually hide their villages as opposed to the larger ones. They usually send out a group of people to meet with anyone who wants to enter the village, so we may be waiting a while. Suddenly, Shino was thrown out of the grass and into the area, quickly getting up and preparing his bugs. Or not. The grass rustled, whoever was heading towards them apparently moving towards them at a decently high speed. Jumping up from the grass, the nin started to run on top of it towards them, pissing off everyone save for Hinata and Shino for not thinking of just running on top of the grass. Reaching the area, they lowered their various weapons towards them, looking down on them from on top of the grass. What is your business? We wish to talk to your leader about making a treaty, Hinata stated, stepping forward in hopes of being able to fend off the metal creatures. The grass nin talked among one another, the apparent leader of the group looking back over at Hinata. Denied. Why? Hinata asked, the leader glaring at Hinata. In joining with you, the creatures would most likely target the hidden grass. As far as we know, the metal creatures will be heading for only the larger villages, leaving us out from any of the destruction, the leader stated, running his hand through his brown hair. Leave now, but. Oboro, stop being an ass, someone called out, walking next to the leader of the group. It was a tall woman, her long hair around the same color as Hinata's, and kept in a ponytail. She wore an interesting outfit, a red and white top, no sleeves, and greenish shorts. What really stood out about her was the large collar around her neck and the extremely large sword she was carrying on her shoulder. We were already told to let them through. The woman looked over at a few of the nins that were standing on the grass. You take our guests to the village leader. The nin looked at each other, then over at Oboro. Knowing that he was going to be defeated in this, he nodded his head to give them the go-ahead. Jumping down, they started to explain on how to run on the grass. Oboro glared at the group, turning around and making his way towards the village. The woman turning towards him. Leaving? I'm going to go scan over the forest. I'll be back in a few hours, Karura. With that, he started to make his way in the opposite direction of the group, the remaining those who weren't talking to the group of people from the Leaf, members of his squad following suit and leaving the area. Karura looked at the back of Oboro with so amusement, turning back towards the group of Leaf nin. So, have you learned it yet? She asked, seeing Hinata, Sakura, Kakashi, and Shizune standing on the grass. Where's the other? She heard someone scream, looking up to see someone flying out into the grass. Yeah, when he found out about how he could expel himself off the grass like a catapult, he. An aburum, right? She asked, Kakashi nodding his head in confirmation. Yes, but how did you K? They come by here every so often to breed their bugs. They have a neutral contract of not disturbing the village in exchange for being able to let their bugs breed here. It's amusing to watch them dance, launch themselves into the air, skip on the grass, every one of the leaf nins, let their jaws drop toddy floor. Skip, yeah, they especially like to do that. We even have a few recording scrolls of one Abermane by the name of Shiby skipping around the area, trying to pick various flowers. I know this because he tried to get me to help him in the process. Oh my god, this is perfect blackmail material. Regardless of that, would you mind leading us to the village now? Shizune asked, Kurura raising an eyebrow. What about your friend? He planted a female bug on me in our back, so he should have no problem catching up. Kakashi stated, pulling his book out. Led the way. Sure, Kurura turned around, looking over at the other nin in the area. Go ahead and return to your squad, since I'm apparently going to be leading them. And I'm not going to miss the chance to watch an aburum during mating season. The nin jumped out of the area and onto the grass, running along the grass towards their squad. Looking at the group of leaf nin, she tilted her head in the direction of the village and started to walk towards it, the leaf shinobi following suit. It had been around half an hour since meeting the grass nin and making their way towards the village, taking their time and walking on the grass. To those who did not wear boots of various kinds, the grass felt good to walk on, and because it was so thick, it was like an elevated version of sand, only without it getting in various improper places, much to their delight. Kurura stopped, looking down at the grass, the leaf nin stopping and wondering what she was doing. Looking around the area, she walked a little towards the left, sinking her foot a little into the grass. Wiggling it a bit, she smiled and looked towards the group. Alright, I found the entrance to the village, if you would be so kind as to enter. Want entrance? The one below the grass, Kurura stated, Shizune looking at the grassy area with a curious expression. Oh, wait, I forgot to do it again. Looking towards the area that she was examining earlier, she began to form seals, whispering something. A symbol appeared over the grass, it retreating into the earth, revealing an open area. Jumping into the area, Kurura signaled for them to follow suit. Glancing at each other, they looked at her in confusion. It's the entrance to the village, just trust me, she said, seeing everyone for the leaf nin hesitating a bit. Besides, if anything happened to you all, Naruto would have my head. You know Naruto-kun? More or less, if you want, I can tell you what I know about him. With that, Hinata immediately jumped onto the ground next to Kurura, looking back up at the others. What are you waiting for? Everyone else sweat dropped, the remaining leaf nin jumping onto the platform. When everyone was on, Kururu began to form seals. A symbol appeared underneath them, the earth shaking and beginning to sink into the ground. It suddenly picked up, deciding rapidly into the ground, everyone using chakra through their feet to cling to the ground. In just a few short seconds, they had made it through the earth and reached their location, the grass village. Wow was all Hinata could say after seeing it, the sight of the immense city overwhelming her. The area was immense, able to hold 5 or 6 story buildings and still have room for an extra 2 or 3. The buildings were made out of stone, beautifully made from what she could tell were minerals of the earth from the way it shined. There were many streets, some suspended high in the area above other ones, yellowish rocks used to light the way in the city. The bottom was almost impossible to see, however, it being completely dark. The ground of land they were standing on was floating in the middle of the air, flying throughout the city and heading towards a predestined area. There were other pieces of ground flying throughout the city, transporting various people to their destination. With a city like this, they would need something to get around it for. The people with no shinobi training. Maybe the new village could benefit from this sort of thing in a way, maybe. Flying through the air for a few minutes, they finally reached their destination. A large building stood at the end of the giant cave in which the city was, it reaching from top to bottom of it, most of the streets connected in some form or manner to it, from what Hinata could tell anyway. The banner of the grass village hanging down in front of the building, it being a combination of various green, white, black colors. The piece of ground they were standing on soon landed in front of the building, thankfully at the top of the long set of stairs that were in front of the building. Kuriru stepped off the ground, walking towards the building with the group of leaf nin following. The shinobi guarding the door stood to attention when Kuriru walked by. Just a simple nod signaling them to let the leaf nin through. From there, they traveled down a hallway full of doors, passing by various offices, facilities, and even a briefing room or two. Finally reaching the end of the hallway, Kuriru entered the very last room, the group of shinobi looking at each other and wondering on Who should go in? Stepping forward a few seconds later, Hinata went inside of the room. Inside the room sat a woman, probably 30 years old and above, her outfit being mainly a tan-like color, a little bit of red running down it, and on the end of the short sleeves, a white long-sleeve one being worn underneath it. She wore a similar skirt, the only thing about her shirt that wasn't red being the blue collar of the shirt. Her cat-like ears twitched, her ponytailed hair swaying as she looked up from her work. I'm guessing these are the leaf nin. Kareru nodded in confirmation. Welcome, Tsunade sent us message ahead of time about you coming to form a treaty. Yay, that's what we hope to accomplish. First, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Alulu, the leader of the hidden village in the grass and the head medic nin. You are? Hyuga Hinata. Hinata was taken back when Alulu suddenly stood up from her chair. Your Hinata was waiting for what Alulu was about to say, preparing herself for what may happen. The person in question shaking her head and regained her composure, sitting back down in her chair. I'm sorry, you just took me by surprise. You must be tired. Please rest here and let us talk about it tomorrow. Hinata was about to ask her about it, but let it drop and walked out of the door. Alulu sat back in her chair, thinking about what she had just learned. Karura walked in a minute later, seeing Alulu deeply thinking about what had gone on. You sure about making a treaty with them? Karura asked, Alulu looking over towards her. I have no problem with it, but Oboro is going to give us trouble on the matter. Alulu leaned forward. Ever since that time with the poisonous gas, he'll never forget what Naruto did. Alulu just closed her eyes as she thought about it. We all won't. Author. Well, that's all for now. Damn. I don't have a catchy phrase to say at this point. Screw it. Anyway, read and review. What? Another plot twist. Author. I'm in a good mood today. I somehow managed to get a few great games of the Inherent for around $50 without Amazon or eBay. Also, I'm putting 2 more links up on my profile, which has been completely redone to my own person style XD. THEDISTURBEDONE 666,666. To be honest, I've thought of it before, but then the story chapters would be held back 2 or 3 weeks for the simple fact that it runs the chance of me being lazy, and if I were to get a beta for this, I would need to get a beta for my other stories as well. All too troublesome. Sabakukyu. I always explain something, that's just how I work with this story, though it may not be a direct answer. Alulu's a woman as stated in the story several times. Dead Bob. You learned that he died in the last story, didn't you read? Oh, zero. Girl of Light Writer. It's all good as long as you have some form of link for finding the story when you want to read it, though I think you overthinking the story. You just have to flow with the events, not try to figure them out. Everything at some point in time is explained in the story, thought with some, it may not be direct answers. Razi the player. You do that, bring a shotgun for protection as well. Hasabusa. Actually, she's the character herself along with Oboro and Karura. They are also the characters as well. Just another one of the many cameos that are going to appear in this story. Another thing I need to announce, there are going to be quite a bit of cameos that happen in this story, so if you have any people you'd like to show up in the story, send me the name of the series and I'll see if I like it. If I do, I may bring in a character or two. Series I won't accept: Inuyasha, Bleach, Harry Potter, and anything else I'll just have to look over and see it will work in the story. XD. Matt-kun. Actually no, I do not have one, or need one for that matter. As stated above, it would slow the fic down too much and run too much of a chance for me to be lazy. Of course, that's only for the story. For the original stories that I plan on writing and releasing on the internet, my first story sucked, mind you XP, so I may send you an email about it when I'm not freaking sick. Kai Dragoon. I know, ain't it a bitch? Always wanted to say that. Shadow Red0. Actually, it's going to take me 2 years to finish all the books in general, maybe a little longer than that if I slack off again. Disclaimer: I do not own Naruto. Enjoy the fic. What? Another plot twist? Hinata turned once more, trying her best to get to sleep. It had been several hours since she had met with the village leader, and she had not been able to sleep at all. No, she was too worried at how the leader had reacted when she heard Hinata's name. She just couldn't let go of the restless feeling she was getting by just being in this village, let alone sleeping in it. She wondered if she would ever be able to get to sleep tonight. The others didn't seem to have that same problem, however, even with having to share the same room, however large it was, still better than the ground though. Getting up slightly and looking around, she saw that Sakura and Shino were out like lights, the former curled up into a ball and the latter in a meditating stance up against the wall. Kakashi was just laying with his legs stretched outwards, his book laying on his face. Shizune was also curled up into a ball, up against the wall and nearest from the windows. The people here apparently liked to be natural and didn't like the idea of beds, so everyone slept on the floor mats. Yeah, it got really cold fast. Deciding that, even with how cold it was, she would still go for a walk. I mean, it may actually help her in some way. It wouldn't make her tired enough to fall asleep in a few seconds, but maybe exploring the village may make her a little more comfortable. Standing straight up, she made her way towards the door of the room, making sure as to not disturb anyone in the room. Reaching the door, she slowly opened it and closed it behind her as she left the room. It's not like she would get in trouble for leaving the room in the middle of the night in a foreign village several hundred feet below ground. Try not to get killed looking at the door a few seconds more. Kakashi lowered the book back onto his face and let his hand drop back to the floor. Hinata was a big girl now, so she would be able to take care of herself. If needed, she could just summon that huge-ass tiger to help her. God, that beast scared the shit out of him. And I thought it was cold in the buildings. Hinata shivered, not expecting it to be this cold outside. The buildings all had windows-like places, only without the actual windows, thus the cold could easily get into the houses. She just naturally thought that it wouldn't get any colder leaving the house, but now she was starting to reconsider that and on going for a walk in general. For all those who are a bit disappointed with Hinata for not bringing a jacket with her on this mission, which really wasn't needed since she was going into a hot forest area, there's just one thing I need to point out. Shinobi weren't the freaking Boy Scouts. They can't always be prepared. Walking out of the building and looking down the road, Hinata first took notice that there were several people still walking around the area. Not as much as when she first entered the city, but still quite a bit. Taking a left, she headed down the road with the least amount of people traveling on it, though it still had a good number of them. She really wasn't in the mood for starting up a conversation, though the walk itself was enjoyable even if she felt like she was missing something. It had been a long time since she had gotten to enjoy something like this. However simple it may have been, it was still better than most of the things that came to mind. It would have been more enjoyable if not for the cold, but that was a minor thing. With all the crap that had happened in the few months, just having time for this was all she could really ask for. Besides getting into Naruto's pants, that is, but that was another story. Turning her head towards a few of the buildings, Hinata took note that they were beautifully crafted. Someone must have spent quite a bit of effort to construct these buildings, just to give each and every one their own design. It was, to be honest, better than the crappy design buildings in Konoha. Those buildings be designed with nothing more than filling in the space kind of thoughts, just to make another building with another use. No thought really into how the person who was going to live in it felt, or how they would react. Then again, they most of the time didn't have the budget to do anything but crappy buildings. Turning her direction back towards the front, she glanced at the individuals walking around the city. Hinata wondered if they had a set time in which the civilians went to bed, not a curfew. But with the fact that you can't see the sun from all the way down here, it would be difficult to determine when to go to sleep or not. For some, living this far underneath the ground would be unbearable just for the fact that you wouldn't be able to see the sun on a regular basis. Hinata wasn't all that disappointed with not being able to see the sun. Really, this place was just like the Hyuga mansion, but less clean, and it had glowing rocks that allowed you to see. The rocks themselves were odd, never hearing of a kind that glowed before. Sure, there were a few that could shine other forms of light off itself, but to produce the light was another matter. Just one of the many things she never knew that existed in this world, the one beyond her village. The Leaf Village had tried its best to stay out of the affairs of other villages, only interacting with them to do the exams, and the very few villages that it had a peace treaty with, they had picked up this policy ever since the last war with Rock Country, all of that being over one misunderstanding. Taking another turn, one towards the right, Hinata continued down the road. People seemingly started to increase in numbers. It seemed a little odd to her, but this feeling was nothing compared to what she had seen up ahead. No, what she felt was the incredible urge to ask Lulu on what the hell had happened to her over the last few years. It had to have been the past few years for this to be here, and of all the people too. Now before her was a statue of her beloved Naruto, one of which had imposing with his arms crossed and his hoodie up. only his lower face and whisker marks visible. One of pose aside, Hinata wondered why this was in the middle of one of the largest street intersections, well, one of the largest ones that she had seen in the village anyway. It was just, so, you finally found it. Hinata turned, seeing Alulu walk up with a smile. I still wish he would have chose another pose, however. Why is there one to begin with? Hinata asked, Alulu walking up and standing beside her. Hinata turning to still face said person. Is it obvious? Alulu asked, Hinata shaking her head slightly. Alulu just looked back up at the statue, her smile widening. The reason this is here is because Naruto built this entire village. What a simple method of getting rid of people, I swear they are getting more lazy by the minute. Naruto stated, crushing the small device that he was holding in his hand. He had found this near the top of the waterfall, it being hidden by the insects under the control of them. Hell, they already knew where the village was, so striking it would be no problem. Probably just wanted to get rid of them without mobilizing the army they worked so hard to build over the years, just to destroy the shinobi. Just biding their time until all their little experiments are ready. This was going to be such a bitch to deal with. Naruto wondered on how he was going to deal with this. Should they try to poison the water again? Simply warning the village would be fine enough. It's not like it was anything big. He had to admit, however, that he liked the modifications on the bugs that were flying around, able to lift something like this now. Those little guys were really becoming useful. To think, he was just cursing the thought of having invented them a while back when they started to use them to find the villages. Well, at least the scouting of the villages took some time, giving him a good amount to get a few things ready at least. Then the earth shock, almost causing Naruto to fall off the waterfall. Crap, of all the times. Naruto scanned over the forest that surrounded the waterfall, seeing bursts of smoke rising a good distance away from the village. From the smoke that was rising, glowing eyes could be seen. Slowly advancing from the smoke, two of the metallic creatures marched towards the village. Jumping off the waterfall, Naruto focused his chakra onto the water and began to skate his way downwards. The village probably already knew about the intruders, so there was no use in wasting time in telling them. When he was far enough down the waterfall, he spun and shot himself from the waterfall, a large amount of water splashing in all directions as Naruto used the speed he got from sliding down the waterfall to jump the great length. He flew through the air towards the first metallic spider, pulling his sword out and charging it with some chakra. Pulling back, as soon as he landed on the creature, he stabbed his weapon into its head, the creature doing all it can to shake him off. Looking over at the other creature, Naruto quickly pulled his sword out and jumped to the back of the metallic spider he was on to avoid the fire burst from the other one. Pretty much ramming his sword into the top of the ass of the creature, he ran forward down its abdomen, slicing it and releases several chemicals into the area. The creature began to move around rapidly, trying to shake Naruto off. Looking to see that the other one was once again trying to burn him off its comrade, Naruto smiled and simple jumped a good distance away from the creature, the other shooting its fire burst at the spot that he was just standing in. In general, the creature went out with a bang, taking a good portion of the ground troops with it. Landing in the forest, Naruto was spotted by the soldiers walking with the machines. Yep, they had the bio-suits, something that covered their body completely from head to toe, a simple helmet covering their face. The suit itself looked like it had muscles on it, while having a black and white strip pattern on it. They were holding a small device in their hands, one of which made Naruto's eyes bulge when they pointed at him. Explosions rained throughout the forest, various pieces of trees themselves flew in all directions. Naruto, who had managed to barely dodge the attacks, saw another wave of projectiles being shot at him. Bring his hands up into a cross, he began to quickly make as many clones as possible. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Having the group of clones move towards the projectiles, Naruto created another single clone. Flipping around, he kicked off of the clone, dodging the projectiles that remained, though the clone wasn't as lucky. He then continued to make clones at a rapid rate, jumping from them to dodge the projectiles, which seemed to be coming from all directions. The sky was literally lit with explosions, Naruto managing to avoid most of them. Looking back at the few that were left, Naruto looked down at the first metallic creature. Even with most of its body gone and the chemicals that ran the beast now covering the ground, it was still managing to barely walk. Smiling, Naruto made more clones and moved towards the creature, flying through the sky towards it. Reaching the creature, he flipped and made one more clone. jumping from that to get out of the way of the fireworks to come. In one final blast of the remaining projectiles, Naruto smiled at his handiwork, though it was replaced by a frown a few seconds later when he noticed the carrier above them. "I'm not going to get anywhere like this," Naruto stated, looking up at the carrier and how it had just dropped another payload of troops. Thinking about it for a moment, Naruto decided that he really had no choice. Bringing his hands up into a simple seal, Naruto began to focus his chakra. He shined brightly in a flash of light, now seemingly absorbing as much chakra as he could from the world around him. When it finally subsided, all of the troops looked towards him, the machines glancing at him as well. Four tails swung gently, his fox ears twitching slightly. The earth cracked beneath him as he walked towards the troops, his brownish cloak blowing in the wind. His face was now covered in bandages, his eyes and hair the only thing visible. Slowly reaching his hand outwards, Naruto extended it all the way, closing it all of a sudden. From there, a large spike made up from the very earth shot up from underneath the creature, the wind suddenly picking up from how fast the spike rose from the ground, it being just about the same size as the metallic spider, destroying most of it easily. Grasping his hand a little tighter, spikes shot forwards from the larger spikes, finishing the creature off. He then turned his gaze over towards the foot troops, who were preparing to shoot projectiles at him. Turning his hand around and bringing it upwards, Naruto called forth a large stone wall between him and the troops. The projectiles were shot and struck the wall, it able to stand through the explosions, the surrounding forest not as fortunate. Once they were finally over, Naruto raised his leg into the air before slamming it downwards into the earth. A wave of spikes were shot upwards from where the troops were standing, most of them being ripped to shreds by said spikes. The few that survived barely were trying to get out of the collection of spikes and be able to move more freely. Naruto just folded every finger but his thumb and index, several pieces of rock floating up off the ground and hovering behind him. Aiming towards the first troop, his hand moved backwards slightly, a rock flying towards the troop at great speeds. Killing the nin, Naruto began to shoot all of the nins. With the rocks, he managed to get most of them before the metallic creature took notice. Turning his attention towards the creature, he moved his hand towards the left to block the attack from the creature, who tried to crush him with one of its legs. Catching the leg, Naruto stared up at it, the creature preparing its fireburst. Taking a step forward, Naruto grabbed the leg with both his hands and flipped the creature onto its back, with little to no effort to. The ground shook, several of the troops accidentally falling onto the spikes due to the shockwave, the remaining 3 or 4 being killed by the shinobi that had just arrived from the Waterfall village. The creature's fire burst, which it had been charging, was shot into the sky towards the ship. It was struck by the blast, the main section of it destroyed by its power. Naruto began to walk towards the group of shinobi, his cloak continuing to flow with the wind. The ship, apparently unable to continue to hover, started to fall towards the ground, it landing directly on top of the other metallic creature, both being destroyed at once. The explosion that happened behind Naruto didn't really seem to faze him. No, he just continued to walk towards the shinobi and head back to the Waterfall village. Naruto looked over at one foe the shinobi as he walked by. The ship, look over it, if you find anyone, kill them. With that, he made his way back to the village for some earned rest. He was going to need it when they began to discuss on what to do, since they are now going to continue to strike with even more forces, now that they've lost a carrier and quite a bit of BDSs. One of the things he loved to fight, mind you, but after dealing with so many at once, it could get out of hand. Not that it was so bad in itself, but having to take care of civilians while they fought just ruined the fun. In a flash of light, Naruto returned to normal, sending a smile at his comrades as he pasted by. The only one really shocked by this being Choji, Ken and Daos, knowing exactly how strong their teacher was. Chabu didn't really seem to care. No, he was off in his own little world again, his eyes completely closed like always. Well, most of the time anyway. Kin waved her hand in front of Choji to try to get his attention, giving up and just grabbing his arm, pulling him off into the village. Naruto guessed that she was going to explain it to him. Dosu walked up to him with a curious expression. Have fun destroying them, you have no idea, author. And that's it. Before anyone asks, the BDSs are what I'm going to refer to as the name for the hugest metallic spiders. If I don't already have a name for them, hopefully not. Not exactly one of the best chapters I've made, but oh well. It still works. Read and review. They're all alone now. Author. For all those wonder, there's a sentence in the story that really stands out from the rest today. Something that I must point out, I didn't notice it until I read over some of the story. Or, they could both be wrong. XP love was never mentioned between the two, and there are plenty of reactions that could have happened. Hinata told Alulu her name XD, though the jealously was a good guess. Also, Naruto's just badass like that. And no, you're not even close. Well, maybe with the Wrecker one, but in another form. THEDISTURBEDONE 666,666. In a sense both, because the percent is how much chakra is used to create it and maintain it, though the true purpose of the forms is far more than some simple power boost. No, it services a greater purpose. Hope that answered your question. Was barely able to understand it. Now, to go watch senseless violence goes to watch the Assassin's Creed trailer. Rozzy the player. What can I say? We need a few crappy ones to make the others look good. XD. Matt-kun, you've discover who they are eventually and meh, I'll send you the original story once I finish the second chapter. Whenever that will be. Major Hinata fan. Or you could say you're getting lazy. XD, and I'd rather have 3,000 words of gold than 10,000 words of pure crap. You could think of it like that with the shortness. Teresa fam. First, I have to state that your name reminds me of Makai Kingdom. They're probably the names of the Spirit of the Sacred Tome and of the fake prophet overlord. Second, you're not even close. I wouldn't use anything as cliche as legendary hero XP, just to let you know. And that's it for reviews. So yeah, just to let everyone know, I wrote this while I was half asleep. Just to let you know. Disclaimer, I do not own Naruto. Enjoy the fic. They're all alone now. And so we finish the signing part of the treaty. Alulu stated, smiling at Hinata, said person letting out a sigh of relief. It had been an hour since they had begun going over the treaty, the entire treaty ceremony just between the two. You're probably thinking that it should be in some gigantic gathering of people, but then again, that would lead to more opportunities for said ceremony to be disrupted. Shinobi from other nations to kill off any leaders that were signing it. No, nowadays, they would just make up the treaty contract and place the official seal on it in blood. Thus the reason why Hinata was busy healing one of her hands at the moment, Alulu having already healed her own and was bandaging it up. After this, what we need to do is, oh, come in, Alulu said, looking over at the person who had entered the room. It was Kuriru, she having a concerned look on her face. Kuriru? I'm sorry to disturb you, but we have a problem. A few grass nin's bodies in the forest, most of them missing a good chunk of themselves in general. They're being recovered right now, Kuriru stated, Alulu taking some time to think about the situation. Alert everyone in the village about this, have the civilians return to their houses until further notice, send out a few parties to search the forest, find whatever that did this, Alulu stated, looking over at Hinata. I still need to finish up the treaty, stopping now would force us to start over. With that, Kuriru nodded her head and left the room, Hinata looking at Alulu curiously about how she was handling the situation. Why? An easy way to destroy this village would be just to blow up the earth above us. The houses in this village are built to be able to withstand any collapsing of the earth currently above us, and the pit below the city is large enough to hold that amount of earth. Some things may be covered, but most of the village would be unharmed. Spreading the villagers out is also better than gathering them all in one area. We usually have at least one shinobi in each family, so there is nothing to worry about, Alulu stated, Hinata just nodding her head. She didn't know how this village was built, so trying to get them to take a different route with doing things would probably get someone killed. Alulu stared at Hinata, seemingly a little worried about how the girl was starting to act. There had to be something that they could do. Hinata, we need to finish the treaty soon, Alulu said, Hinata breaking train of thought and giving full attention to her, though she was given enough time to come up with something, however small an idea it may be. I know, but I have a question. Would you mind another squad being sent with the search parties? So what are we doing out here again? Sakura stated, looking over at Shizune and Kakashi, as all three continued to jump through the tree branches. Shizune looked over at Sakura. We've been asked by the grass village to help search for whoever killed the shinobi that were recovered around 15 minutes ago, Shizune stated. Hinata wanted us to support the search parties as to help strengthen the treaty. What about Shino? Sakura asked, grabbing a branch and swinging over towards another one. She had slowed down a second and fell behind the other two, but managed to catch up a few seconds later. Why isn't he with us? Shino's still having problems handling his bugs right now. That's one way of putting it, Kakashi stated, turning a page in the book and continuing to read. Shizune looked over at him, a glint appearing in her eye. Kakashi, do you want me to tell your wife that you're reading those again? Shizune replied, Kakashi instantly closing his book and putting back into his pouch. She has you so whipped. Somehow, I'm not bothered by it either. Well, to an extent, Kakashi stated, looking behind himself slightly. It had been so hard to read his books now, ever since a few years ago. It must have been a twist of fate, he figured, with everything that's happened. Though he wished that fate would leave his porn alone. By the way, Kakashi, how's your daughter doing? You asking me, of all times, about that? Kakashi said, blinking at Shizune. Shizune's face brightened up a bit, looking straight forward. Well, it's just that I haven't seen her in a while. Still an awkward time to bring her up, Kakashi replied, Sakura clearing her throat. Can we stay on topic? Sakura asked, Shizune's face growing even brighter, coughing a bit in response. Right, Hinata wanted us to look over the search parties. She also had a hunch that the people who committed the murder may disrupt the treaty ceremony. We need to make sure that they don't even reach the grass plains, let alone the village itself. Shizune looked between the two. That means that you both need to put in more effort. Get on his case about it, not mine, Sakura stated, pointing over at Kakashi, who just shrugged in response. Right, anyway, we're falling behind. Let's increase our speed for now. With that, all of them pumped chakra into their legs, rushing to catch up with the search parties. Naruto-kun? Naruto shifted in his meditative position, his eyes twitching slightly. He was currently outside of the Waterfall village, under the waterfall. Naruto-kun, are you awake? Naruto opened one of his eyes, looking around the area. It didn't seem like anyone was around, so he might as well establish a link. Naruto-kun? I'm here, Miss Kyuubi, didn't I ask you not to make a connection with me? It violates my own privacy, Naruto stated, closing his eye and returning to his meditative position. He heard the Kyuubi laugh even through the link. It still sounded like she was right beside him for some reason. Naruto-kun, I've been with you since you were born. I've seen everything about you and know everything you have even thought over the past 16 years. Your privacy doesn't really matter at this point, the Kyuubi stated, still laughing. Naruto mentally wondered if he could ask Gaara for a trade-off of demons. Gaara's demon was psycho, but at least the woman had some respect for others. Don't start thinking about exchanging me for that bitch of a first tail. You really hate her, don't you? You're both tail demons, you should get along somewhat well. Naruto only heard the Kyuubi HMPH in response, Naruto laughing at how his demon was acting. Keep his up and I'll inform Hinata-chan of what you thought about her over the past years. Shutting up now, Naruto stated, the Kyuubi being silent for a moment. Miss Kyuubi? Oh, sorry Naruto-kun, I was just recalling something. The Kyuubi replied, stalling a little bit once more. Anyway, now for the reason why I've made the link in the first place. Naruto waited, and after a few seconds with no reply, Naruto wondered if she got sidetracked. And that would be? I was building dramatic effect, the Kyuubi said, taking in a deep breath. Alright. I wanted to let you know that the mystical we got earlier, Ruby, has managed to break free of her confinement within the tree you had Iruka-kun make. Crap, I knew we should have added another layer of seals. Breaking from his meditative position, Naruto began to rub his temples. Do you guys have any way of tracking her? Besides using the boy from before, no, we have nothing that can attract her. The Kyuubi explained, Naruto wondering about what's going to happen with the mystical on the loose, before answering over the link. You might want to inform the Sand Village about this. That girl, in all general, wants to get into Irvine's pants. They'll get a warning and a laugh out of it, though this may be a good thing for Irvine. He needs to loosen up anyway. Alright, cutting link now. The Kyuubi then cut the mental link, Naruto returning to his meditation underneath the waterfall. Warning, this next part will contain gore. Reading beyond this point is of your own choice, and I am not held responsible if you do. And warning. This is Sakura stared down at what appeared to be the bodies of the search parties they were supposed to have backed up. Kakashi and Shizune not even giving a second glance to it. They took note not to let Sakura come with them on these kinds of missions if she couldn't handle this kind of slaughter. Basically, their body parts were everywhere, and I do mean everywhere. In the trees, the river next to them, the grass was completely covered in blood. Various parts of the people. It was hard just to walk through the area without stepping on an internal organ of some kind. Sakura then proceeded to hurl, Shizune walking over and patting her back slightly. I'm alright, Sakura stated, slowly standing straight up again. She had her eyes closed the entire time, opening them as well. Of course, she saw the head of a nin, and if being half crushed in, she once again hurled. It was just too much for her. Sure, she was a medical nin, but just how everyone here had died, how horribly. She just couldn't take the thought of it. Finishing up, Sakura looked over at Shizune, her eyes still closed. "I'm fine now, Shizune-sensei, thank you," Sakura stated, Shizune hesitating for a moment before nodding and allowing Sakura to stand straight up. Kakashi just continued to read his book, taking note that this almost as bloody as with what happened with the incident. Almost not wanting to remember something so cruel, he thought about how Naruto must be doing right now. The bastard had been helping them with so much, but what was he trying to accomplish in the end? "Shizune, Sakura," Kakashi said, closing his book and scanning over the area. "We might want to leave soon. We're probably being watched right now." "Yeah, they've been watching us before we even entered the area," Shizune stated, looking at Sakura, who seemed to be surprised by this. "Surprised? But how do you know?" Kakashi found a tracking bug a little earlier, mechanical one. "Naruto warned us about them before he left," Shizune stated, glaring at Kakashi. Though, how he knew still comes to mind. Kakashi whistled innocently while Sakura raised an eyebrow. "Where was it?" "On my ass," Shizune stated, her glare intensifying. Though, he wouldn't have known unless he was staring at it. "I have no clue what you mean. I was just checking around the area." "What area this is has still yet to be determined," Shizune said, Kakashi coughing a bit. "As I was saying, I was scanning over the area when I noticed that it was on your ass, plain and simple," Kakashi stated, looking between the two. "Now, if you're done interrogating me, shall we be leaving now?" he asked, Shizune glaring at him for a few more seconds before letting it slide. She could always just tell his wife she would put him through hell just for looking at another woman. Sakura just nodded her head and made her way back towards the village. "Hold it, Sakura, where are you going?" "Back to the village, where else?" Sakura replied, Kakashi only bringing his hand up to rub his temples. "That's the thing, now that they're watching us, we can't return to the village, not ours or the hidden grasses." Kakashi looked over the area once more. "At this point in time, if we try to go to either of the villages, it would give away their locations. Right now, all we can do is move and try to outmaneuver them." He then began to walk in another direction, pulling out his book and beginning to read it once more. Once both Shizune and Sakura heard the perverted giggles, they knew that he was no longer reachable under anything than being given a full view of them. "Looks like we're on our own," Shizune said, catching up to Kakashi and walking beside him. Sakura also ran up to Kakashi, walking on the other side of him. She didn't know what was going to happen, but she needed to be ready for anything. And for all those wondering, no, this isn't some indirect reference to the Boy Scouts. Those money-hungry bastards have nothing on a shinobi. "Looks like it's time to go," Naruto stated, getting up from his meditative position and walking on the water towards the shore. Reaching it, he grabbed his shirt and hoodie, still wearing his pants, mind you, placing both of them on. After that, he grabbed his various belts and began to strap them on. Upon finishing, he looked over at the waterfall to see his comrades walking down the pathway towards the area. They had spent a little too much time here, considering how relaxing it was compared to what was happening. Could you really blame them? Maybe next time I come here, I'll bring Hinata-chan. She and Asuna may like it here, Naruto thought, thinking it over a bit. Probably bring her after I deal with them. That could take a while. "Naruto-sensei?" Kin said, walking up to Naruto. "Something wrong?" Naruto turned to face her. "Nothing at all," Naruto stated, smiling at the entire group. "Well, now that the treaty ceremony is taken care of, shall we be returning home?" The few that were actually listening to him nodded, Chabu still listening to music and ignoring the world around him. With his smile slowly turning into a grin, Naruto turned and leapt into the trees, making his way back towards village, everyone following behind him. On village down. So many more left to go. Author, please read and review. The two are a little closer. Author, nothing much, though I almost didn't update, see below for details. Teresa fam, it's not hard to say never used impossible ideas, it's whether or not you can use them that counts. Yes, let you imagination soar. Mwahahahahahaha. Rozzy the player, though this one was made in a rush. Major Hinata fan, it's all good, though this one is a little shorter than usual. THEDISTURBEDONE 666,666. The percent will always equal the same transformation. Too lazy to be any more creative. Somehow, I can never have any filler chapters unless it's setting off a chain of events with the characters. Damn. Vid. Nope, none of those. You were getting there with the last set of guesses, but legendary screw up wouldn't make much of a sentence. Status 10 again. Nether is legendary sucker. Almost feel bad for Tsunade. And to think, you've only seen the tip of the iceberg with them. Disclaimer, I do not own Naruto or anything. Yeah, I have a sad life. Enjoy the fic. The two are a little closer, if only a little. And that's it, Ilulu stated, the large scroll between them glowing for a few seconds before settling down. It took us a little more time than I thought, but we were able to finish it without being completely interrupted. Hinata smiled at Ilulu before looking down at her hands. They were a little sore, but at least she was able to secure the treaty even if it costed more blood than she had thought. I'm guessing you must be tired after going through all of this, correct? Ilulu asked, Hinata looking over at her. Oh, no, I'm fin. Really now? Ilulu asked, raising her eyebrow at how Hinata was wobbling a bit, quickly placing her hands on the ground to keep herself balanced. There's no need to push yourself, you've earned some rest. I really okay. I need to. Before she could finish, Hinata collapsed to the ground, apparently out like a light. Ilulu smiled at the scene, rolling up the scroll and placing it to the side. Getting up and walking over to her closet, she pulled out a blanket and went back over to Hinata, placing it on her. She had a few blankets stored in her room for treaty signings. They were useful for people who were new to the whole process in general. Taking another look at Hinata, Ilulu walked out of the room and made her way down the hallway, only to be surprised to see Kareru. Kareru, what are you doing down here? Ilulu asked, Kareru's eyes narrowing. We have another problem. When our teams hadn't reported in yet, we sent out one final team of puppet masters to scout for them. We found their remains scattered around the ground. The nin from the leaf have yet to be found, she stated, Ilulu's face dimming a bit. Has Oboro been informed? He insisted on being the leader of the squad of puppet masters. Kareru replied, Ilulu closing her eyes while thinking about the situation. Opening her eyes, she looked back towards her room. You know what he's going to try to do, right? Ilulu asked, Kareru nodding her head while Ilulu looked back at her. We can't let that happen. We'll need all the help we can get to make it through this. Keep an eye on Oboro. I don't know what he may be thinking right now, but we can't risk anything. Ilulu ordered, Kareru looking behind Ilulu and towards her room. What about Hinata-san? Leave her be, she needs to rest a while. Kareru nodded once more, excusing herself and walking back down the hallway. Ilulu thought for a moment before heading back to the room. Entering it, she went over to her counter and pulled some herbs out, along with a few tools. Sitting next to Hinata, she began to mix them together. They wouldn't attack her as long as Ilulu was around. She would only need to stick with Hinata until Oboro calmed down. After that, she would be fine. Though she thought that Hinata would be able to take on Oboro, it would look bad if two members of the two villages got into a fight just after the treaty ceremony was completed. Let all your wariness fade away. Hinata-chan, you'll need all the strength you can get right now. So that's what happened? Tsunade asked, Naruto nodding his head. Tsunade leaned forward, raising an eyebrow at her grandson. So you mean to tell me you took out not only two of the mechanical spiders and a large troop of soldiers, but a carrier as well? Also, where's your team? Tsunade asked, looking around the empty room. Naruto simply nodded his head. To the first question, yes. To the second, I let them go already. You only need one person to report on the mission, Naruto stated. Tsunade sitting back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment. No bullshit. No bullshit, Naruto replied, scratching the back of his head a bit. How's the other team doing? We just received a report on them, Tsunade said, sitting forward and reaching over to a pile of paperwork. Sitting back once more, she began to read over the paper again. It basically says that they found a few teams of grass nin killed out in one of the forests that surround them. It says that Hinata had asked that Kakashi, Sakura, and Shizune to go with the teams to search for whoever it was that killed the shinobi, but have turned up missing. What about Hinata-chan and Shino-kun? Naruto coughed, Tsunade letting an amused look slip over her face for a moment before looking back over the report. They are still safely inside of the village, Hinata staying behind to finish the treaty ceremony and Shino staying because his bugs were acting up. Swan looked over the report a little bit more. Something tells me you knew that would happen if Shino walked into that area, didn't you? I plead the fifth Hokage. Rejected. Swan stated, Naruto shaking his head and walking towards the exit. Opening the very crappy maid door and beginning to walk out of it. And Naruto, you don't have to worry, she can take care of herself. If she can't, then Asuna can take care of her for us. Yeah, I know about both of those statements. That tiger still scares me. Who gave her him again? Tsunade only shrugged at the question. I think it was Shino-kun, but it's hard to remember. "You're excused," Tsunade stated, Naruto looking over at her all of a sudden. "I really don't have time for this kind of discussion, I still have all of that." Swan pointed over at the large stack of papers that were sitting in the corner next to her desk. "So, if you could just leave. I know that you just want to be alone to drink, but fine. Have fun with it." Naruto then exited the room, closing the door behind him. Tsunade stared at the door for a minute or two before grabbing a piece of paper from the stacks and beginning to look over it. Who knew that Naruto himself doubted Hinata's abilities either? That, or what they're up against may be something that even Naruto fears. Either way, Tsunade was going to drink after this sheet. She'd get the rest done eventually. "You know, this place is really starting to look like a village now," Naruto stated, walking past a couple buildings still being built. Though they still have a long way to go, they had seemed to be able to build a few essential buildings, like a commander center for the Hokage and other high-ranking officers to work in. Another one that Naruto had spotted was an academy, knowing full well why they were making that so soon. When Konoha was destroyed, the 6th Hokage ordered for a report on what shinobi were left in the village. Most of the Jounin and Chunin had unfortunately been killed in the fighting. All that was really left were the genin, who were forced to retreat along with the civilians and the Anbu forces hunters, which were skillful enough to survive. There were Chunin and Jounin that survived, most of them having received quite a bit of injuries. They were one of the reasons why they couldn't leave Konoha right away. It was going to be hell for genins and academy students, with everything that was to come. Maybe he shouldn't have suggested that new training program, but then Naruto figured it was too late now. Looking over the village to be, Naruto noticed something, walking over to a group of trees. Naruto scanned over them before taking a few steps and looking to the side. "You know, this is somewhat unexpected," Naruto stated, looking at the scene before him. Sakura glaring at him with a passion. "Shhh, you might wake him," she stated, looking down at Iruka, whose head was laying in her lap. Naruto used to think that Iruka snored like everyone else in the family. With how quiet and peaceful he was now, Naruto figured this was just one for those little things he didn't know about his family. "Enjoying yourself? You wouldn't believe it," Sakura said, smiling down at Iruka. "He's been trying to do extra work for the past few days, got me to help too. He actually managed to finish a few houses in the building by spamming Cage Bunchin over and over again. If you're tired, why don't you just sleep next to him?" Naruto asked, Sakura smiling slowly forming into a grin. "Because when he does wake up, I'm going to sleep. I just want to be able to see him like this before forcing him to sleep with me." Naruto blinked before turning around and walking away. "Is something wrong?" "What don't you say wrong?" Naruto stated, continuing to walk off before remembering something and looking over at Sakura. "Hey, you wouldn't happen to know, by any chance, where Miss Kyuubi is? The Kitsune bitch she left a while ago said something about meeting with family members." Sakura replied, Naruto's eyes narrowing at the information. Turning back around, Naruto continued to walk off. "Naruto-kun? See you, Sakura-chan. I have something I need to look into." Short Sakura watched Naruto walk off, looking down at Iruka's peaceful face and running her hand through his hair. This, from how Naruto was acting, could be bad. Though she herself never considered a bunch of kitsunes much of a problem, maybe there was more to it than meets the eye. Laying back against the tree, Sakura decided to sleep ahead of time. "You never know when you'll have to fight next. I hope he knows what he's doing." Naruto, "I wonder how Gaara's doing?" a woman asked, looking over the various letters she and him had written to each other over the years. To think, someone that she was almost twice the age of had been the person she was most attached to. Just the way he wrote his letters, never holding anything back, short, sweet and to the point. Much better than the mysterious men she had meet from the village, probably getting ready for war. She didn't like the idea, to be honest, Gaara being used as a weapon. Though it was the reason why he was fused with the first hill demon, she still didn't like it. She, with all these years of writing, had gotten attached to him, though where that attachment would be classified was still yet to be decided. The woman knew that she cared about her pen pal, it being deeper than she could have imagined than just a simple friendship. Gaara felt the same way too, though she had to admit that his pen name was still cute. Writing as Captain Crunch, she had a hunch that someone helped him chose the name, as Gaara would probably slaughter quite a few people. before ever choosing a name like that on his own. It was amusing for her every time she read it to see him sign as that person, though his writing words, she was able to guess who he was a year beforehand. Now, however, it would be difficult for her to mail him any letters. Why, you ask? No post office, and using a bird would run the chance of someone tracking the village. The woman just gave up hope of being able to send him something anytime soon, not like it would be an approbate time with the war and all. Kurenai-sensei? Said person looked over at the source of the voice, finding Kiba and his oversized dog looking down on her. Are you alright? I'm fine, Kiba, Kurenai stated, getting up from her spot on the grass near a few trees. Wiping the grass off the back of her dress, she looked over the two of them. So, tell me what's wrong. How? You guys never bother me unless something is wrong. You need someone to be the mediator in an argument, Kurenai stated, glaring at Kiba. And this time, be truthful about what Akamaru really said. Kiba grumbled a bit, his dog hitting his head against his master's legs to get him to talk already. Well, you see, Akamaru believes that if I didn't sleep most of the time, that mom wouldn't yell as much at the two of us. I think that mom will yell at us regardless of whether or not I sleep most of the time. Kurenai's sweat dropped at Kiba's logic. Kiba, did you ever think that maybe if you worked more, that your mom wouldn't yell at you as much? Kurenai asked Kiba, rubbing his head sheepishly. Well, yeah, but that would require physical labor and all, Kiba stated, looking down at Akamaru. Not like you're going to help. I saw we just go find a nice patch of grass and now. Kiba, at this point, was being pulled by his right ear in the general direction of where his family had set up camp. Akamura following behind and wagging his tail. Kurenai-sensei, what are you? Shikamaru is starting to rub off on you. I knew not to let you to talk with one another, Kurenai stated, picking up the pace towards where Kiba's family was. Your family needs your help right now, so stop laying around and actually do something. Also, I'm going to tell your mother about how you've been sleeping instead of doing anything to help the village. There was an awkward silence. Come on, Kurenai-sensei, let's talk about this now, Kiba said, trying to struggle against Kurenai's grip. I mean, let's not do anything rash, like informing her. You know what she'll do. That's exactly the reason why I'm going to inform her, so that both of us can chew you out at the same time, Kurenai stated, looking over at Akamaru. Though, you're doing a good job, Akamaru. Wait, he's not going to get yelled at, Kiba screamed, Kurenai only nodding in response. Kiba looking over at Akamaru. I really hate you right now. Don't blame him for your own mistakes, Kurenai replied, her grip tightening. Though, it does give me another reason to yell at you. I've been feeling a little upset lately, so letting some of it out on someone would really help. Crap was all Kiba said after that point, accepting his fate to come at the hands of his sensei and his own mother. Throughout the entire thing, Akamaru was wagging his tail happily. Dogs really were man's best friend after all. Author. And that's it. And to think, it almost wasn't updated due to the new video games I have received over the weekend. Must beat all of them. Please read and review. Of the three. Author. Sorry for the delay. Some issues came up and I was unable to post XP. Well, at least it's here now, finally, and that's all that matters. And if you were hoping that this would be some grand chapter, you're out of luck. That's next chapter. .xd, I think. Vid. Depends, do you mean him being perverted or those around him? THEDISTURBEDONE 666,666. Hey, you never know, Gara's a little older in this story, and if I rework the other's age a bit, it could work. .xd. As for the story's length, I won't know until it's actually done. I mean, I can get the basic idea of the story, but I can't plan on various things that may happen in between that idea. Yes, that was meant to confuse you, muhahaha. As for the villages, just wait and see. Read. You'll have your answer by the end of this book. The next book XD. Razi the player. Yes, I am 0.0. Major Hinata fan. Radiant Stories or however you spell it, Makai Kingdom, Phantom Brave, and another's who name I can't spell. Don't feel like looking up. Well, you never know. With the amount of characters I have in this story, he just might end up with her, he just might end up with another, or end up by himself. XD. Meh, you never know. Hasabusa, I don't know. XD. Just wait until he shows up again. Subabukyu, your name shall now be shortened from this to Sub the Dub, if that's alright. Your name made me go look back at the reviews 4 times XP. Can't comment on the short chapter part, you already said it yourself with the updating. INUBOY 86. Chapter added. Now wait, hold on, please hold. Sorry, chapter rejected, please come again. Sorry, I was bored when I typed that. Misk Soldier. If I haven't given you a simpler name, I'm doing it now for the sake of getting back to hack GU faster, so yeah, if you don't mind. If you do, I'll use your original next time XD. Nice indeed. Janaya Benny. It's kinda already apparent, then again, I'm the author, so it seems apparent to me. Guess I'll have to work with that in later chapters maybe. Disclaimer, I do not own Naruto or anything really, yeah it sucks. Enjoy the fic. Of the three. Wait, was that Kiba just now? Naruto thought, looking around the area. He was currently in the Inyazuka area passing by a few of the clan's members and their packs. The Inyazuka clan was known for their talent raising dogs, or anything that was considered canine. They had a very strict and very well kept hidden training guidelines for the dogs of the Inyazuka clan. The members also having a training regiment outside of anything they learned from their jounin. Sensei. How Naruto knew this, well, it was quite detailed in the Forbidden Scroll, which he memorized to heart. Back on track training was like that for most clans, giving their children to be training, so that they're better than the others and stand out more. Though, at this point in time, it probably didn't matter as much, the fact that Konoha was now gone and all. You never know though, Naruto thought, passing by a few Inyazuka women, noticing how their eyes were trailing his body. This had been happening a lot lately, more than usually anyway. Ever since it had become knowledge to the village that he was a Kage, he had been getting offers a lot of the time. It was getting harder and harder for him to keep it from Hinata too, lest she find out and go on a rampage. How amusing it might be, Naruto still needed as much help as possible in what was to come. Though, Naruto did smile when his target came into sight. Hana-chan, Naruto said person turning to face him with a smile. Looking down, Naruto gave a grin to her dogs, who wagged their tails in response and barked. Hana raised an eyebrow at Naruto's interesting behavior. So tell me, Naruto-kun, what brings you here today? Hana asked, Naruto looking back over at her. What, can't I come say hello to one of my most cherished and beautiful friends? Hana rolled her eyes. Cut the crap or I'll tell Hinata about your new fangirls. Naruto sighed at the threat and reached into a scroll hoister, pulling out one and tossing it to her. Honestly, you're no fun. Here, I was told to give this to you, Naruto stated, Hana narrowing her eyes suspiciously at him. By who? I would tell you. But there's ears everywhere, seriously. Naruto looked around the area at all the Inyazukas that had gathered in the area. They tried to make it look like they were casually coming through the area, but failed when their eyes glanced over them a little too many times. Hana unraveled the scroll, reading it with little interest. If it was another fanboy of hers, then it wouldn't be anything special. Reading it, her eyes slowly widened, looking at Naruto in pure shock. Suddenly she latched out at him, wrapping her arms around Naruto and squeezing him tightly. Naruto, under the power, could not breathe. You would be amazed at how powerful a woman was at times. Hana-chan. Thank you, Naruto-kun, Hana said, squeezing him even tighter. Naruto, not breathing for several minutes, tried his best to pull the woman away. Hana-chan can't breath. Hana instantly let go of Naruto, stepping a little bit back and allowing said person to take a really deep breath. Dropping to his knees, he gasped for air, Hana raising her eyebrow to what Naruto was doing. Drama queen, you're a Kage, get over it, she stated, looking back at the scroll in her hands. Still, thank you. Glad to be helpful, Naruto stated, slowly getting up from the ground. Hana walked over to him and placed his arm over her shoulder, helping him up. Here, Hinata-chan would kill me if you died from a hug, of all things, Hana stated, helping Naruto move out of Inyazuka territory. Looking back, Hana saw several of the women in her clan glare at her intensely. There was a few interesting thing about the women of her clan. They weren't afraid to claim a man while he was down, forcing themselves onto him while they were weak. It was to make them seem like they were dominate, a male who could overcome them being considered and dominate of the couple. This was why most Inyazuka women were single. We might want to leave before they jump us. They're not going to let a Kage level man just walk away, Hana whispered, Naruto nodding. Bringing his hands up, Naruto started to form some seals. Looking back at the women, Hana saw they approaching them. Looking back at Naruto, he had finished the seals. Whispering something, they both disappeared, the women from the Inyazuka clan. Looking at the spot that the two had been standing. Being Kage had its benefits, especially when they granted you access to more than one forbidden scroll. You sure about this? Alulu asked, Hinata nodding her head in response. I mean, your teammates may be able to return at some point. Alulu and Shino were not currently standing in the large grass plains before entering the village, Alulu having a worried expression. No, we might as well leave while we can, Hinata stated, looking over at Shino. Have your bugs calmed down now, Shino-kun? Shino nodded slowly, afraid that he would set them off again. One of the few things that could scare him, or any member of his family, which was having your bugs screw each other while still inside of your body. Hinata smiled, turning her attention back to Alulu. Is there a chance that he might come after us, you know, Oboro? Hinata asked, Alulu shaking her head. No, he seems to be holding as much back as he can. Maybe it was better that you leave now that I think about it. At a time like this, we can't have people fighting within the village itself, or risk being caught. Alulu replied, blinking when something came to mind. By the way, Hinata-chan, where do you plan to head to? Well, to be honest, I really don't know. With the state that our own village is in, we can't exactly lead the enemy to it. Any ideas, Shino-kun? The Sand Village is considered an ally, Shino stated, Hinata taking into consideration of the pros and cons of the matter. Making a choice, she gave all of her attention back to Shino. No, I was thinking something else. I hope to be able to accomplish 1 or 2 more treaties if we can. We'll head for Miss Hinata said, looking over at Alulu. Thank you for signing the treaty and for helping us. Alulu nodded her head, while Hinata and Shino looked at each for a moment before turning around and jumping onto the grass, running towards the tree line. It was going to take quite a bit of time to reach the Mist Village, even if she should have played it safe and gone to Sand Village. Hinata couldn't shake the feeling that she was forgetting something about it. Nah, probably wasn't important anyway. I guess someone's talking about me, Irvine stated, rubbing his nose. Tamari only blinked at what was one hell of a sneeze. He had blown himself several feet back with it and into a wall. That only discovering a dam. Tamari, walking over to him, offered him a hand up off the ground sand, Irvine taking it. That was strange. Is that the first time you've sneezed like that? Tamari asked, pulling Irvine up. When Irvine was on his own 2 feet, he began to wipe the sand off himself. It's happened a few times. Now what were you saying before? Irvine asked, looking around the Sand Village. The place was crowed, very crowed, as much as Konoha once was. For some reason, the people out here didn't mind the weather, walking out in the hot blazing sun, as if it was just a summer's day with a nice cold breeze blowing. Irvine was having some difficulty with it, however. Having stripped himself of his hoodie and black shirt, it being replaced with a net one. Of course, he didn't exactly have any impressive abs. I was saying that Kankuro wanted to see you, she said, pointing in the direction of the Hokage tower. He wanted to talk to you about something, seems to be important. Seems to be. I don't even listen to half of the things he says. He is kinda crazy after all. Irvine blinked a few times before setting off for the tower, thinking about something. Hey, Tamari, where's Akami-chan? He asked, Tamari shrugging at the question. I really don't know, we received an emergency notice from the Hidden Leaf regarding her brother, so she may be taking care of something at the moment, Tamari stated, raising her hand up above her eyes and looking towards the sky. God, I hate this freaking heat. Yeah, I miss the forests and my hoodie. Irvine sighed at the thought of having to give it up, Tamari looking over at him with a dull expression. Suck it in, you're a man, aren't you? Going without your hoodie for a while won't kill you. This coming from the person that was just complaining about the heat. Irvine asked, Tamari raising her eyebrow at him. You really want to get into a game of words and wits with me? No ma'am. Thought so, Tamari stated, slowly letting a smirk slide over her face. By the way, have you considered a haircut? She asked, glancing at Irvine's hair. It had grown over time, going from its short look to being shoulder length. Irvine shook his head in response. No, I actually kinda like my hair this way, keeps the sweat out of my eyes, Irvine said, bringing his hand up to rub some sweat of his forehead. Even if it causes me to sweat, that is. How many times did you say that people were allowed to bathe monthly here? 2 or 3 times maybe. You'll get used to the smell after a while, and at least the tower has air conditioning. It was amusing, to say the least, when Irvine picked up the pace to the tower. Her, along with anyone around, found this quite amusing. They could also tell that he was somewhat of a newcomer, considering that he didn't already know that no building in the Sand Village had air conditioning. A few people in the village didn't even know what that was. Tamari smiled, now able to take her time to the tower. She was supposed to get Irvine to the tower in the shortest amount of time, but now that he was running towards the tower at a speed that would get him there in 5 minutes, she could take as much time as possible. At least she had told the shinobi who were guarding the door to let him in when he finally reached it, so she wouldn't have to worry about him going on a rampage or anything, right? So, where did he go again? Tamari asked the shinobi guarding the door, pointing to the left. Turning in said direction, she made her way around the tower. Of all the times to have a guard shift. Walking around the tower, she looked around the area for the largest shadow she could find. Finding it near a group of buildings, she walked over to it to find Irvine sitting in it in a meditative position. "You lied about the air conditioning," Irvine stated, still keeping his position. Tamari walked till she was right next to him, leaning backwards with her back up against the wall. "As long as it got you here as fast as possible," Tamari stated, Irvine opening up one of his eyes and looked at her. "So, do you really know what Kankuro-sensei wanted to speak with me about? I know that you listen to a conversation regardless of whether or not it's interesting. Can't you just wait till you get inside the tower?" Tamari asked, Irvine shaking his head in response. "Why wait when I can hear about it now?" Irvine stated, Tamari looking down towards him. "You could see it for yourself and not ruin the surprise." Irvine closed his eye and returned to his meditative position once more. "Something wrong? He wants something. That's the only reason I can think of that he'd give me something for free." Irvine, deciding that it'd be better just to get it over with, stood up, stretching afterwards. "So, to the tower?" Tamari nodded, Irvine taking a moment to wipe the sand off his ass before both of them walked towards the tower. A nice peaceful silence overfalling the two. 3, 2, 1. Explosions rained throughout the hidden village in the sand, buildings collapsing left and right. People began to run in the streets, dodging the buildings' pieces that fell, the ones that were unable to being crushed underneath the weight. Shinobi from all directions began to run towards the gates, shouting barely being heard over the continuous explosions that rained down on them. The earth shook beneath them, Tamari and Irvine able to keep on their feet, looking at each other, Tamari motioning her head towards the gate. They jumped towards the nearest building, running along it and doing their best to avoid the explosions. "Head for the gate." Irvine was barely able to hear Tamari yell out to him, focusing more on dodging the bursts of sand that were shooting up, the explosions that were happening throughout the city, and keeping from falling down due to collapsing buildings. Looking in the direction of the gate, Irvine saw several egg-shaped objects heading for them. Wondering on how to dodge the blasts, he saw a shadow flicker in the corner of his eye, Tamari having appeared in front of him, her fan fully opened. K's Buriko no Jutsu. Tamari then brought her fan downwards, a large burst of wind being sent towards the objects. As soon as the wind hit the objects, they exploded, the sky lighting up due to them. Tamari looked over at Irvine and grinned, said person just giving her a relieved smile. "Thanks. Anytime," Tamari stated, looking in the direction of the gate. "Let's hurry to the gate. Gaara and Kankuro should already be there." "So, is this the important thing that you guys needed to talk to me about?" Irvine asked, Tamari putting her fan back into its hoister. "You'll know when we get there, author. And that's it. I think I know I needed to edit something from this story, but meh. It's a very large plot hole if I leave it. That's if I haven't already cleaned it up, but I'll just say it ever existing or say it was a typo, just because I can and I'm lazy. Please read and review of The Empty Skies. Author. Look down at the bottom's author note to find something important regarding the story XP. Vid. Little tidbit about what you mentioned that would be wrong for the story. The snake bastard is Naruto's grandfather. I don't think that he would even screw his own grandson. Then again, I'm not him. So how would I know XD? Sub the dub. Not all fangirls, for I do know quite a few that are some of the best people you could ever be around, be friends with. What you're looking for is death to all rabbit fangirls. Lord of the Trees. Indeed. Teresa fam. The scroll as in Hana scroll? Go back to near the beginning of the story and read what Itachi and Naruto say carefully, then you'll understand. Did it sound like they were glaring at the cage? Damn, I was trying to make it sound like they were glaring at Hana, but oh well. Flaming Death Ninja. Nope, these will probably the only fanficity series I make, for I plan on moving on to original work once I finish this fix. Hasabusa. Damn straight it was. Hugs are fun for the whole family, aren't they? XD. THEDISTURBEDONE 666,666. Well, you know what that means for this fic, don't you? It means I'm about to wipe something imaginative out of my ass and or other part of my body. Don't ask, look forward to seeing it. Disclaimer, I do not own Naruto. Enjoy the fic of The Empty Skies Part 1. Tamari and Irvine ran headed towards the gate, dodging the various explosions that ranged through the village. People ran through the streets, various screams being heard between the explosions. Tamari had increased her speed by flying on her fan, while Irvine did a small hop shuriken flying underneath his feet and hovering in place, allowing him to hover above the ground and keep up with Tamari. After a good 10 minutes of constant running, they managed to make it to the gate. People were running all over the various levels of it, a good chunk of it having been taken off from the attack. Tamari decided to go on ahead, flying above the people and towards the outside of the village. Irvine, however, was forced to attempt to make it through the crowd, using the skates he was wearing and jumping off the walls. It took him a minute or two, but he managed to make it outside, seeing Tamari and Kankuro standing next to each other, along with a large amount of shinobi ready to assault anything that approached the village. "Kankuro-sensei," Irvine yelled, running towards him, said person looking over at him along with Tamari. "What's going on? What do you think?" Everyone ducked, an explosion coming a little too close to the front line. A second later, everyone stood straight back up, Tamari looking over at Irvine. "Gar is taking on the ground troops in the first-tailed form," Tamari yelled, pointing over towards a sandstorm that was raging away from the village, the sky itself starting to be altered by the immense sandstorm. Irvine heard something let out a roar, seeing a large snake-like creature come out of the ground near the sandstorm. Its entire body was composed of a metal, the top section having a darker metal, while the bottom section had a lighter metal. Its head had around 2 sets of jaws to it, set up in a box-like formation, 3 large mechanical eyes scanning over the entire desert. Suddenly, it let out a roar at the sight of Irvine, preparing to charge towards him before being stopped by a large amount of sand. It was crushed a second later. It was then pulled back into the sandstorm, another roar being let out with more explosions to follow. Irvine looked back over at Kankuro. "Why is the village still being bombed?" Irvine asked, Kankuro turning his attention away from the fight and over to Irvine. "The snake creatures are just to keep busy. They have an air corps bombing the village," Kankuro stated, pulling out scroll from a hoister. "I'm trying to gather as many puppeteers to take care of it as I can." Kankuro then threw the scroll towards the ground. In a puff of smoke, a large bird-like puppet appeared, its cloak fitting around it, looser than other puppets. Irvine's eyes widened at the sight of the puppet. Yes, the puppet you and your brother designed," Kankuro stated, raising his arm to protect himself from sand being blown from the battle Gara was in. "We've started to mass-produce them along with other puppets. Gara told us to do it when we found the plans that you had left here. I'm sorry for not telling you before." Kankuro has been taking in more than one apprentice at a time. He now has control over a few dozen puppet master squads in the village, Tamari said, also trying to protect herself from the sand along with Irvine. Kankuro connected chakra strings to the puppet, taking control of it and jumping on its back, basically saying he's developed the Hidden Sands first all-purpose shinobi with various puppets that you and your brother designed. "Wow, how long ago did you start to do this?" "A year or so ago," Tamari stated, Kankuro able to adjust the bird to how strong the wind was, looking down at the two. "We don't have much Another explosion rang, hitting the front line of the shinobis that stood in front of the gate. Several bodies of shinobi flew through the air, hitting the sides of the gate before falling to the sands. Kankuro gritted his teeth at the sight of the explosion, looking back down at Irvine. "I need you to use your puppet, the original version of these, and help us take care of the aerial core." "Sure, I guess," Irvine replied, reaching into one of the scroll hoisters that he carried on him and looking through it, while Kankuro looked over at Tamari. "This is only Puppet Master's Tamari, you can't fly in these winds," Kankuro yelled, Tamari nodding, knowing that it really was the truth, and Kankuro not just trying to get rid of her. Tamari took out her fan from her hoister, grinning at Kankuro. Kankuro raised an eyebrow at the grin, wondering what the hell she could be happy about at a time like this. She suddenly ran forward, flipping her fan out and bringing it down, causing a large tornado to appear in front of her. Various shinobi ran out the way, apparently used to this happening, and having the reaction time to dodge it. The tornado spun for a few seconds before the sky lit up in explosions, the air core that was dropping the bombs flying away from the tornado and far from the village. Tamari looked over at her brother, still grinning as before. "Oh, I'll just think of something to do," Tamari stated, looking over at Irvine to see that he had finally pulled out the scroll. "Both of you, give him hell." Irvine threw the scroll into the air, in a puff of smoke the puppet appearing before him. "Good luck, and may Kami-sama have mercy on both of you." Tamari then ran back towards the gate walls, jumping on it and running upwards towards the top, preparing her fan for the fight. Kankuro looked to see that Irvine had already adjusted his puppet. No writing on top of it. What caught his eye, however, was the lack of the black cloak that was usually found on puppets in general. "Where's the cloak?" Kankuro yelled, Irvine looking over at his sensei. "It's not needed with this puppet, plus it reduces its speed," Irvine yelled back, seeing quite a few puppets leave the village. "Shouldn't we be going?" Kankuro nodded as both took to the skies. This as Irvine followed the other puppet masters through the clouds, rushing upwards to reach the height of the enemy ships. It only took a minute, maybe even less, before they bursted through the cloud line and made it above them, appearing in front of the other puppet masters. Irvine looked around at the things they had rushed through. Did Gara make these? They were to help slow down the enemy's aerial forces, but they seem to have little effect. Kankuro said, looking back at the puppet masters. "The enemy has one carrier class and an unknown amount of aerial troops. Master Squad shall take down the aerial troops, while the Alpha and God Squad shall take on the carrier." Kankuro yelled, all the other puppet masters giving a loud roger in response. Irvine looked over at Kankuro in confusion. "So, what am I going to do?" Irvine asked, Kankuro looking back over his shoulder at him. "Oh, I knew I forgot something." Kankuro looked over at one for the squads. "God Squad, let me introduce you to your leader." He then pointed over at Irvine. "Follow his orders in the battle. He knows the puppets you're riding on better than anyone." Irvine's eyes widened at what he had just heard. He started to sweat at the thought of it. "You can't be serious. This is the first time I've even ridden this into combat." "Well, this could be a problem," Kankuro stated, seeing the God Squad fly up behind Irvine. "They're already taken their positions, just go along with it, alright?" Irvine looked back at his squad members, who nodded at him. He just smiled nervously and looked back and front, taking note that he was starting to hear something. The noise itself started to get louder to him, everyone else looking around in confusion and wondered what the noise could be. Irvine suddenly realizing what it was. "Crap, everyone scatter." Irvine dived downwards, his squad members hesitating for a moment before following behind him. Kankuro, out of sheer instinct, flew towards the left, his squad also following him. Blasting through the sand clouds, a large burst of energy shot forwards towards them, wiping out the Alpha Squad, which was unable to escape it in time. Kankuro cursed at the sight. "There it is," one of the shinobi yelled, the others turning in the direction to see the carrier. It was large, around as big as a fourth of the sand village. The bottom part of it looked like a metallic, being split into two large and one smaller part. Two large wings extended from each side of the ship, along with propellers near the sides and two large ones at the end. The top, however, looked like what would be considered a regular sail in the ocean ship. Two large cannons were connected to the front, smoking from the blast it had just fired. Swarming around were what appeared to be small metallic birds. A few human-looking troops riding on the back of them. They were quite a number of them, at least twice the number of the squads that were flying towards the ship. The part that sucked the most was that they didn't have the surprise element. Kankuro looked over at Irvine. "The Alpha Squad was wiped out. You guys will have to take out the carrier yourself." Irvine was about to say something, but kept quiet and nodded. Kankuro turned towards the ship at that point. "Let's go." Kankuro's puppet suddenly picked up speed, flying towards the ship. His squad increased their own speed, preparing their weapons for fighting the enemy. The swarms of metallic birds flew towards them, the sight of them opening up and an object coming out of each side of it, releasing the objects. They flew towards the squad of puppet masters. "Fire!" The bird puppets then shoot something from their mouths, it looking like a few kunai put together, each seemingly having explosion tags on them. The objects and kunai met the skies, erupting in a burst of explosions. Irvine did his to guide his squad through the explosion, looking back at Kankuro's squad for a moment to see that they had engaged with the enemy's aerial troops. Explosions rang throughout area of the sky that had become a battlefield to that squad. Irvine looking back towards the ship in time to move out of the way of energy blasts being sent towards him and his squad. Twisting and turning, the sky lit up with even more explosions and objects from the ship. Irvine saw several of the metallic birds heading towards the squad, preparing his puppet for the assault. Moving his fingers, a compartment below the puppet's tail opened, releasing a few egg-shaped devices, them coming to life a second later and flying up towards Irvine, hovering around him and the puppet. Before the metallic birds could shoot the objects, the eggs that were flying around Irvine cracked open, an opening appearing and a kunai being shot from it. The objects that the birds were carrying were destroyed before they could even be launched, causing the metallic birds to be destroyed in the process. Irvine looked back at his squad members, only a few of them still flying with him. The other had either been taken out by the explosions or had flown back to distract the metallic birds. Irvine, still dodging the incoming objects from the ship, made his way upwards, his remaining squad following him. What few metallic birds that managed to follow them were destroyed by the eggs that were released earlier. The puppet masters that were following him even had their own versions of the eggs come out, taking out any incoming objects that got close to them. Irvine looked down at the ship, seeing that it had guns on the top deck for the ship as well, various troops running around it and trying to readjust their weapons to fire at them. A few of the people on the ship just rose their own weapons towards them, firing what appeared to be smaller versions of the objects. Irvine and his squad scattered, taking various directions and actions to avoid the incoming barrage of objects. The eggs were having issues taking them out due to their size. But once they finally managed to strike one, a good portion of the objects were wiped out by the explosions. Even a few of the metallic birds were wiped out in the explosions. Taking a look down at the ship, Irvine prepared his puppet for a bombardment, a hatch opening up underneath it. Twisting in the air, Irvine headed towards the ship deck. From the compartment, several large collections of kunai were released, the collections breaking into separate kunai and landing on various parts of the deck. The troopers, apparently knowing what the kunai were, pulled as many as they could out of the deck, throwing it off the deck before they exploded. A good chunk of the deck was taken out by the explosion, but the main ship itself was left unharmed. What troops were left unharmed ran towards the nearest entrance into the ship. Irvine looked around the deck to see that all troops had apparently gone inside. Scanning around the deck, Irvine looked over closely to see if any troop was left, or if any machine would start to move. Well, he was right about one thing, at least. Hatch doors opened up, several small machine turrets rising up to the deck and taking aim at Irvine and the squad members that were too close. Rising into the air, he was able to avoid the various projectiles that were shot at him, his squad members also able to avoid it as well. Of course, it didn't take long until one of them was shot down, another one of the members flying towards them and recovering the puppet master. Irvine kept his attention on the turrets, preparing to drop another bombardment onto the deck. Swooping down towards the deck and moving to avoid the projectiles, he dropped the bombardment, the kunai splitting from the collection that they once were and spreading around the deck, making haste away from the ship's deck. Irvine looked back to see it burst in explosions. The deck itself seemed destroyed, but the ship was still flying. Damn it, this ship just won't. Irvine thought over his options on what to do, thinking over it as carefully as he could while dodging the objects and projectiles that were being shot at him from the metallic birds and the ship itself. The deck's weapons may have been destroyed, but the side weapons had been left, for the most part, unharmed. Deciding on a choice, Irvine took note that it seemed to be the only real choice he had. He looked over at the puppet master who had saved the squad member when their puppet was hit. "You too," Irvine yelled, dodging a round of projectiles from the ship. "Come with me, we're going to enter the ship," Irvine yelled, the two puppet masters looking at each other before looking back at him. "Are you sure that's such a good idea?" "Just trust me," Irvine yelled, flying through the projectiles that were shot at him. The other two puppet masters were able to fly through it, though due to the fact that it was two of them on one bird, they seemed to slow down a bit. When Irvine was close enough, he jumped from his puppet and landed on the deck, looking over towards the puppet and whispering something. The puppet disappeared in a puff of smoke, a scroll landing in Irvine's hand. Placing the scroll into a scroll holder, he looked over at the other two puppet masters that had landed on the ship along with him. "We need to hurry, we don't know how much longer Kankuro-sensei and the others can last against the aerial troops," Irvine stated, the other two nodding as all three of them made their way towards the nearest entrance. Author: "Well, I do have an announcement. I won't be updating these for a few weeks. I've been having some thoughts lately on where my stories were going, about whether or not I would get credit for this, really. As it may be a good story, it is still a fanfiction, and barely anything about it belongs to me. Thus, I'd like to spend the weeks until summer vacation happens in 2 to 3 weeks working on original stories, and to get a nice rest from this story. I used to be so scheduled about it. Anyway, please understand and take note that this is not something about a discontinuation. Hell no, I said that I was going to finish this story, and I sure as hell will. Please read and review. A past long forgotten." Author: "It is time, my friends, I have returned somewhat. Through this break of mine, I have looked through many aspects of my writing and how this all comes together as a whole. I have lost most interest in writing fanfiction as opposed to writing my own original stories, where people can't tell me that I shouldn't write it like this or that's not how it's supposed to be. As my own story, it would be able to shape it as I see fit without anyone telling me otherwise. Truly something I have been waiting for and wanted for so long. At the same time, I am not someone to go back on what I say, for as long as a person reads this story, it shall be completed. It will just no longer be a trilogy. With what little interest I have in fanfiction now, the story itself will most likely alter and start to pick up the pace. It may even be for the better with the new ideas I've been getting about it lately. Then again, it will no longer be the same story as before, and may lose some of its edge. Whether or not I continue I leave to the readers and reviewers. This story is for you guys to enjoy, after all XD. Disclaimer, I do not own Naruto or anything else, except for those original stories which are crap, really. Enjoy the story. A past long forgotten. It had been 10 minutes since Irvine and the other puppet masters had taken to the air, an entire squad being wiped out before they had even reached the carrier and a good portion of the squads taken out due to the large amount of air troops that the enemy was using, along with all the anti-air fire that they were using. At this point, Irvine and 2 other puppet masters were able to land onto the deck of the ship after a bombing raid that was done by Irvine himself. The deck itself was pretty much gone, various pieces of it having been blown straight to hell. Most of what was left of the deck had been scorched, flames among areas on the deck. The objects that had been firing the projectiles at him earlier were in ruins, some of them even falling of the ship and into the desert sands. Irvine scanned over the deck for an entrance into the ship, looking over at the other 2. They were both wearing large cloaks, ones that matched their puppets. For all those that are wondering, no, they weren't wearing black cloaks, only Kankuro wore that. You see, the cloaks themselves would cause heat stroke. For the love of God, they were wearing black in the middle of a desert. No. The cloaks were changed to a light brownish color to keep them from being killed off by the sun alone. Kankuro was only allowed to wear the black outfit because of his body's tendency to cool itself down for some reason. It wasn't a blood limit, but for some reason his body could be blazing hot. Then suddenly it convert to a flash of cold energy that covered his entire body. No one knew how this happened, it just sort of did. Now back to Irvine. He turned from the puppet masters, continuing to look over the ship. What doors were visible seemed to be barred closed. They were probably afraid that he had a suicide puppet or something. It's not like he didn't have that kind of puppet, it's just he didn't carry them in large quantities. Irvine, having scanned over the deck and thought of no other possibilities, reached into a pouch that he had and popped out a small starfish-shaped puppet, throwing it over towards the door. The 2 puppet masters wondered what Irvine was doing, seeing the puppet hit the door and stick to it. Irvine brought his hands into a single seal. A second later the starfish puppet exploding in a large explosion. The 2 puppet masters brought their arms up to cover themselves from any derby. Irvine, watching the door patiently and waiting for the smoke to settle. When the smoke settled and all that had happened to the door is a large scorched mark, Irvine wondered about what else he could do. Squad leader? The female puppet master approached Irvine. How do you plan on getting into the ship? Irvine looked over at the woman. Well, there is another way, Irvine stated, pulling out a scroll from his hoister. Throwing it up into the air, the scroll disappeared in a puff of smoke, soon replaced with one of the largest puppets that either of the 2 had ever seen. It was a spider, one that easily came up to just below their shoulders. On its feet were wheels, it being the only part that wasn't made out of wood. Irvine walked over to the spider, a hatch opening on top of the spider. The hatch itself extended from most of the abdomen of the spider to some of the head part. Irvine jumped onto the spider puppet, reaching into his scroll hoister and pulling out 2 more scrolls. Throwing them to the ground, Irvine got into the hatch, the pilot seat of the spider, requiring him to lay on his stomach. The scrolls turned into a puff of smoke, revealing 3 puppets, 2 standing together and 1 standing by itself. What the puppet masters took note of about the puppets were that, for one thing, the puppet standing by itself was missing its third eye. Also, the other 2 puppets seemed to have been built at the same time, probably brothers in a sense. One had spiky black hair and the other had long sliver hair, both of them sticking close to one another. The puppet masters looked over at the spider puppet to see that it had begun to move. Alright. Let's be on our way, Irvine stated, moving his puppets out of the way while the mouth of the puppet opened up, shooting a kunai from its mouth, or at least what looked like a kunai. It hit dead cent on the door. The kunai, at that point, hit the door and stalled for a moment before beginning to move into the door. A few seconds later, the door erupted in flames, the pieces flying in all directions. The puppet masters shielded themselves with their arms, the puppets of Irvine moving in front of the puppet masters. Irvine then moved his large puppet forward towards the door, the other puppets following. The two puppet masters looked at their leader, or what he was currently driving, in confusion. "Do you two have any extra puppets?" The two puppet masters checked their scroll hoisters to find them empty. "No, it seems that we forgot to bring them along with us before we took off from the village," the male puppet master stated, Irvine thinking about what could be done. "Just stick close to the scorpion." The two puppet masters just gave him a blank stare. "It's the giant spider puppet. You named the spider puppet Scorpion?" the male puppet master asked Irvine, continuing on his way towards the door. The spider puppet able to squeeze through it. The other puppets followed off behind it. The two puppet masters looked at each other once more before chasing after their leader, deciding not to ask about it again. The inside of the ship was a new thing to Irvine, it being made completely out of metal. Not one piece of wood, rope, wire, clay, seemed to be used to make the ship. It felt a little awkward to be in such a ship, but that was quickly lost when the enemy found them in the ship. Hokage had been moved to the front, taking out enemies. With its flamethrower, the twins had been stationed near the back and only really had to take out a few enemies with their rapid kunai launcher. The spider puppet itself didn't really do much of anything except blow up any door that got in the way of the group. "How are you two doing?" Irvine called out from the robot to the puppet masters, who had been using what few kunai they had to take out an enemy that had gotten too close to the group. The puppet masters looked over to the large puppet. "We're doing fine, squad leader, though I wish we had our puppets," the male puppet master stated, turning around and stabbing an enemy through the heart. It took quite a bit of chakra to enhance the power of the stab to piece the armor, but he was able to do it. The female puppet master took out another enemy that had gotten too close, Irvine continuing forward through the ship. They had continued to go through the ship at a slow speed, being careful of an enemy that crossed their path. It wasn't long, however, before they had reached an elevator. Cramming everyone into it, they rode it down to the lower levels of the ship, traveling too near the core of the ship. When the elevator opened, they made their way down the hallway, taking out the enemies that stood in their way. After almost 10 minutes of constantly taking out enemies and traveling through the ship, they had finally arrived into one large room. The room itself was one round arena, it seemed, purplish in color and having one single tree near the back of the room. It glowed a purplish color itself, probably the reason why the entire room was purple. Several of the tree's leaves flew upwards, incinerating when they reached a certain height. Of course, with all the weird shit that Irvine has seen in the world, himself being one for example, he really wasn't all that concerned with the tree. No, it was the person that was standing next to it that caught his attention. The man, who was easily a head taller than Irvine's full height, was currently leaning backwards on the tree, his eyes closed. The man was wearing very thick clothing, the purple-green clothing covering most of his body. The large trench coat that the man was wearing almost touching the floor. The man opened his eyes, the pure black eyes he had actually reminding him of something. All of a sudden, the hatch of the spider puppet opened, Irvine stepping out of the puppet and jumping to the floor, the puppet disappearing behind him in a puff of smoke. "Leave the ship," Irvine stated, looking back at his squad members. Both of the puppet masters looked at him in a confused manner. "Squad leader? It's an order, report back to Kankuro immediately," Irvine stated, all of his puppets save for Kaji disappearing in a puff of smoke, THS scrolls returning to him. "Use Kaji if you run into any trouble, I'll handle this," Irvine stated, looking back over at the man, who was only grinning at him. The puppet masters hesitated for a moment before they nodded and went back towards the elevator with Kaji, returning to the upper levels. Irvine glared at the man, said person only grinning back. "So, you've finally remembered, won't Ruby be excited about that?" the man stated, beginning to walk around the room towards Irvine. Irvine walked in the other direction, them circling each other. "No, I haven't remembered anything," Irvine stated, continuing to glare at the man. "I just sensed something about you." The man grin widened at the statement. "Excellent, that means you're close. Can you guess what experiment I am?" the man asked, stopping in his tracks and extending his arms and legs out. Irvine froze, scanning the man's body for any movements that could lead to an attack. The man continued to grin at Irvine, whose eyes had finally connected with his. Irvine hesitated for a moment, staring into the pitch black eyes of the man. "Hydra. Yes, now you're truly starting to remember," the man stated, lowering his arms. "Hydra experiment, Mark III, name, Russ." The man bowed towards Irvine, looking up at said person. "And you?" "Hercules experiment, Mark VIII, name, Irvine." Irvine stated, snapping his neck and taking a position as if he were holding a sword. "My body, it's Your body is even reacting to the bow. Excellent. It won't be long now, Russ said, standing straight upwards. Irvine immediately dropped his bow, staring down at his hands and wondering about what the hell was going on. Irvine looked over at Russ to see that he was laughing to his heart's content. Yes, Ruby will be very pleased. You seem pretty obsessed with her, Irvine stated, Russ walking a little bit forward. Warning: there will be blood and gore from this point forward. Reading on from this point is of your own choice, and I am not held responsible for your actions. And warning. Now, don't think of it like that, think of it as an older brother helping out his younger sister, Russ stated, falling forward and landing on all fours. Slowly, his head started to deform, its skin peeling off as Russ's body started to grow. His shoulders split open, several other appendages coming out from the shoulders and coming together to form several objects the size of Russ's previous head. Russ's body itself had lost its former look, growing 3 times its normal size to that of its normal body. What was left of the man's head was his mouth and his black eyes, it balancing on its hind legs and letting out a roar. Show me how much you've remembered. Irvine glaring at the beast before him, sighing at how things had turned out. Irvine fell to the floor, grabbing pieces of it while screaming in agony. Slowly, the bones in his arms and legs grew, 4 spikes shooting out of each arm and leg. The bones in his hands grew, ripping the flesh on his hands until all that was left were bones, the skin on the arms being stretched to the max. The same thing happened with his feet, only the bones started to come together to make 3 claws, ones which he was now standing on. His bones on his face through all of this was pressing through his skin, ripping it as well. Not enough for all of it to fall off, but enough to where you could have never seen what he looked like beforehand. His eyes turning blood red. Actually, it was the entire eye that turned red, noting but red on it, along with all the blood that was coming off his face. Finally, his back started to move, his ribcage slowly pushing outwards. Suddenly, in one fluid motion, they shot up from his back, the skin on his sides being ripped to shreds, blood pouring from it. On his back now were 8 bones, a small thin piece of skin in between each of them, some blood on them as well. The 2 creatures roared at each other, running towards one another, clashing in the center of the room. Their power alone caused the room to split, the 2 powerhouse creatures fighting one another in the attempt to overpower the other. It was a fight that would shake the very sky itself. Kankuro easily dodged the projectiles that were shot at him, swerving through them and taking down a few airborne troops along his way. Most of his squad was able to survive the fight, taking down a good portion of the enemies that were fighting against them. A few of the enemies even turned tail, most likely they were cowards and just wanted to save their own lives, or something had happened to the main ship. He had seen Irvine and a few members of the creator squad enter the ship a while ago. He had yet to see any reaction from the ship or to see them return from the ship. Twisting in the air, he launched several kunai towards the projectiles, causing them to explode before they reached him. He then flipped, flying downwards then straight forward to avoid the projectiles that were being shot at him. Is there no end to this? Kankuro mumbled, throwing some of his own kunai at the projectiles and causing them to explode. They seem to have an unlimited amount of ammunition for some reason. Master Kankuro, some shouted out to him, Kankuro turning towards the voice. It was the 2 puppet masters that had been with Irvine, both riding on a single puppet. The male seemed to be in control of it, while the female was clinging to the man's waist tightly. Report, sir. Squad leader Irvine is fighting what appeared to be the leader captain of the ship. He ordered us to leave the ship immediately, the puppet master stated, Kankuro gritting his teeth at what he just heard. Damn it, the ship suddenly started to shake, hovering a bit off course and tipping sideways. The hull let out a sound as if it were being strained by something. Seconds later, the hull erupted, various pieces of the ship flying in all directions due to the explosion that had happened on board the ship. The ship started to smoke, descending towards the sands of the desert. Of course, that didn't matter for the simple fact that the ship, all of it, exploded before the pieces that had fallen off earlier had reached the sands. A good portion of the enemy airborne troops were wiped out because of the explosion, the rest being taken down by the derby. Some puppet masters were also taken out by the derby, Kankuro and the puppet masters, from before managing to survive the blast. What pieces were left of the ship fell towards the ground. Kankuro watching helplessly through the entire thing. Author, read and review.